Good evening, good day, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be around the world. Welcome to Splendid Isolation number 24. And I'm going to do, as always, and start us off with a suitable tune. Good idea if I unmute my microphone, I think. Thomas Arne's Royal Britannia to start us off with. Suitable tune. And thanks to Patriotic Archive, which is an excellent YouTube channel where I get a fair amount of the music that we play on the streams, and I would say people should go and subscribe to Patriotic Archive. I'm going to do what I usually do, go around in a clockwise-like manner and ask our guests if they have anything in particular to bring up as a first subject. I'm going to start with our friend right on Limbu.
Hello, afternoon. I've got nothing to talk about, to be honest, but one thing is that it's G.K. Chesterton's birthday.
Excellent.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, that's it, to be honest. But to bring up a quote of his, a nation that has nothing but its amusements will not be amused for very long. And you can say that with the state of the current nation of what we love, England and the Isles.
Yep.
It tries to amuse and pander to the left and its globalism. But then when it dries up, what do we have left of England? And that quote links with what we see with England today, to be honest.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I know Chesterton is a favourite of a channel that I've long been subscribed to, the Distributists, so he likes Chesterton very much. But yeah, cool. Adamant.
Yeah, I've been trying to get through this Dominic Cummings interview, which is like 7 hours long, and I got for about 4 hours of it. I don't know. I don't think it's quite as good as some people are making out. It's all right though. He does go for a few little gems there. I know that there was a bit of a press narrative going around that some people were sort of repeating back to me, where they're going, "Oh, Labour's loving it," and I kind of thought, well, Rebecca Long Bailey was in there, and she was trying to ask him some scathing questions, and she didn't really like his answer, which I thought was kind of funny because they've now come out and said that he would work for Labour on the right terms, and I thought I didn't really get that at all from their exchange.
I would never see that chap working for Labour, to be honest with you, under any terms.
Well, I kind of thought at first when people said it, I thought he could well do. At first, that's what I thought. I thought he could well do because he's a very sort of prudent operator. But no, after seeing their exchange, I'm not really sure. And the answers he was given and some of the sort of the attack lines he was taking, I thought I don't think that's really on the cards.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I've only listened to the highlights of that stuff. I haven't got 7 hours spare to listen to that, to be honest. I mean, I probably have if I really, really thought it was that important. But I believe that most people are not going to take a lot of notice of it anyway, perhaps sadly. I was happy that he slagged off Matt Hancock, who I definitely think should be sacked. And everyone who follows this stream knows that I am no great fan of Alexander Johnson. So, there we go. Would I sooner have a Conservative Party led by somebody like Rees-Mogg as the Prime Minister? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think that's liable to happen. I don't think that's liable to happen. But if I could swap Alexander Johnson for Jacob Rees-Mogg, I'd do so in a heartbeat.
But Rees-Mogg isn't really that good, is he?
No, he's not.
No, he's not.
No, he's better than Johnson.
Yeah, better than Johnson. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what choice, and if you had the choice, I mean, and a hypothetical utopian choice to choose, who would you want for Prime Minister? Edward Ley, your Rees-Moggs, and your Peters, them lot, they would be great. But then, unfortunately, we won't ever see that in the next 20, 30 years.
Right, but I mean, Rees-Mogg is like measures of mere centimeters better than Boris at best.
Yeah. He's well, mate, I'd say inches rather than centimeters, but I would say inches.
Yeah. There's definitely a good difference between them.
But you're right. Jacob Rees-Mogg is not the guy that we all thought he was, or a lot of us thought he was, say 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, I kind of feel that some of that was just a bit of a sort of a hype train on the right that drew people to that conclusion. I mean, you only had to go. I mean, I often like to look up politicians on that site. Is that they work for us, where you can see their policy decisions over the last however many years, and you can really find out a lot of a politician quite quickly just by having a look at what they've previously supported.
That gives me an idea for a stream, Atom, and we should do a stream one day where we go through Conservative MPs on that site.
Yeah.
I think that would be very enlightening for a lot of people.
But yeah, so like on there, like I know some people thought he might be like the pro free speech guy, but when you look on there, he's actually always sort of consistently voted against sort of actual good liberal positions. But then he's also not based at all either, because he's always sorts of voted against any particularly good religious or nationalist positions as well. So
yeah, I mean, he's always said that although he's a Roman Catholic, he's always said that he probably no, actually he hasn't. Let me think. No, he said he would personally vote against abortion on demand, but he wouldn't make it government policy.
Yeah. I think the problem is with most Catholics, especially in politics, is that they aren't integralists. They don't believe that voting for your policies is the right way forward, your ideas or doctrine.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Can I just say to Patriotic Archive in the chat, we played Royal Britannia from your YouTube channel early at the start of the stream, and I did tell people they should go and subscribe to your excellent YouTube channel. All right, guys. I think at this stage, Adam, you got anything particular you want to bring up about what Cummings had to say?
No. There'll probably be some bits that will come up over the course of the stream anyway. So
no worries. All right, we'll move on to Harold Shipman, who is actually, I do believe, the inimitable Sojourner.
Good evening. Yes, I would like to bring up that today marks an awful day in English history because it's Oak Apple Day. And for those of us who are Cromwell connoisseurs and believe that the Protectorate was the way forward for our great nation, today is a very somber day because it marks the end of military rule under Cromwell and the Restoration, which was essentially the fulcrum and the turning point that led us to mass immigration and degeneracy today.
Big cringe.
So I'd like to I would like to say to all of my Republican and Cromwellian brothers, our time will come again. We just have to be patient.
That's really cringe.
Cringe.
Yes,
you guys were just standing for a papist, so I think that's cringe.
Based, I would say.
I'm neutral on the papist thing, but Charles I was not a papist.
Yeah.
No, but Rees-Mogg is.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't even say Rees-Mogg's a papist. I mean.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't go that far either, to be honest with you. And also, we have to remember that the chap who allowed Roman Catholics to serve officially in the British Army and the Royal Navy, and also to become MPs, was, of course, the Duke of Wellington.
Great man.
He was sensible, I think, because there had been Roman Catholics in the British Armed Forces for years, including serving under him in the Peninsula and at Waterloo and so on. It's just they had to do so secretly. Can I just say, Limbo, you've got a hell of a lot of background noise for some reason.
Oh, sorry.
Was Cecil Rhodes a good inheritor of Cromwell's will to power? That's what I want to know.
Cecil Rhodes was not, as far as I know, wasn't a Republican, though.
No, massive differences.
But putting all those differences aside, I mean, as an individual, as a driven individual.
I think Cecil Rhodes had his good points and his bad points, like most human beings. He did some good stuff. He did some bloody bad stuff, and he caused a lot of problems for Britain, and also for English-speaking people in South Africa as well.
Yeah, and he said some things that, like, because one of the things I've seen recently is they've been really going after Cecil Rhodes again quite strongly, and looking back, I kind of think like why, like one of his quotes was literally like someone's skin color shouldn't prevent them from holding a British office or something like that, and I thought, oh, a bit cringe.
But that doesn't stop these Black Lives Matter anti-British morons from wanting to get rid of it.
Well, I mean, they don't care. I mean, truth's subjective in all these things. So
yeah. Well, I did. Coming on to what I want to bring up to start with on this stream, I, as I usually do, briefly went through the poisonous bias brainwashing corporation website, the BBC website, just before the stream, and their top stories are some producer who has been fired from his job from historic allegations about sexual impropriety, which means, like, you know, some 2 or 3 women come along and say, well, this guy did something 10 years ago, and everyone just believes them. You know, why didn't they go to the cops at the time? But, you know, they're children, obviously, women. They're not adults, because otherwise they would have taken responsibility and gone to see the cops at the time. You know, 10 years ago was not the Dark Ages. You know, so that was the first story. Then the second story was Stonewall, which is like some gay rights advocacy group in the UK, who is now suggesting that if you are not in favour of transvestites and people who are trans, you are the same as an anti-Semite, and you are literally Hitler. So that's their second story. Their third story was some third world doctors in the National Health Service don't feel at home.
Wonder why.
You couldn't make this up, really. It's just so fucking funny, honestly. And of course, the fourth story was Sasha Johnson, you know, the Black Lives Matter woman who was shot while she was at a drugs party in Peckham.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they've charged a black guy for shooting her, but they describe her as a black equal rights activist when she actually suggested she'd like all white people to be slaves to black people. So this is the BBC in 2021, and like apparently people don't look at this and go, what the fuck? It's like you couldn't make this up. If you were Soviet Russia in like the 1980s trying to have a go at the Brits, even they wouldn't have done this. You know?
I've heard mixed things about whether she actually said that. Some people are saying that was a
no, but actually I've seen that. No, it was filmed. It was filmed.
What was
filmed? Her saying that was filmed, I believe. I saw actually it wasn't. It was recorded. I listened to a clip where she said it. So it's just whoa, I don't know, man. It's just so crazy. So yeah, I'm going to say also, incidentally, going back to what Sojo was saying about Cromwell, to Patriotic Archive in the chat, you absolutely need to find a Cavalier song, which is something like When the King Returns in Peace Again, which was the song that all of the people who wanted to get rid of Cromwell used to sing. So you need to find that for Patriotic Archive. But it's not too difficult to find on YouTube, for example. What have we got here? Marco Calais Spagay. You are going quite far in the chat, mate, that you're going to get chucked off if you accuse people of stuff like that. Because I have no truck for IRA supporters on this stream. rather whether they be provisional IRA or the original guys. I have no trouble with them at all.
Didn't Fowle support the IRA?
I don't think so. Not really. No, not that I mean, he maybe probably. I mean, he might have said he did because, like, he'll say anything that's like anti-Anglo, basically.
Fairs.
So yeah, I think there's some truth in that one. Put the guns down, Jerry. Yeah, I mean, one of the things people often forget these days is that Jerry Adams was once saved by the parachute regiment, who found him after he'd been shot by the loyalists in Northern Ireland. And instead of doing what I would have done if I'd have found him, which is to say, make sure there was no reporters around and then kick his head so hard I broke his neck, this guy rescued him. I would have killed him stone dead. I'd made no bones about it. He was a terrorist. But, you know.
Yeah, why didn't someone theoretically put a bullet through his head?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I wouldn't have done that because that would have been too obvious. They would have taken the bullet out and said, "Oh, hang on, this is a British Army bullet," you know. But I would have certainly broke his neck if I could have managed it. I certainly wouldn't have called no ambulance. You know, it's like he was my enemy as far as I was concerned. Do I go for yellow girls? Asks whoever is daughter of Albion or pretending to be daughter of Albion in the chat. I suspect that's someone pretending to be daughter of Albion. And I will turn around and say, not really. Not unless they're cute, anyway. If they're cute, then probably.
IRA trolls.
There are some fit yellow girls, let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you know, there's cute girls in Japan and places like that. There are. And I mean, this is not a particularly racialist channel, in case anyone thinks it is. It's not really. I mean, I want mass immigration to the UK stopped, but I want all mass immigration to the UK stopped. And I don't care if it's from Poland, it should still be stopped. But it should also be stopped from the third world as well. So yeah, that's where we go. That's where we go on that one.
Here we go. Does Duke endorse White Boy Summer? This is. This is
I've only vaguely heard about it, and it sounds a bit cringe. It sounds a bit cringe to me. It sounds a bit cringe to me, to be quite honest. I've only just vaguely heard about it, but what I have heard, it sounds a bit cringe, and it sounds very American. And again, this is
it's very Yankified.
Yeah, this is not an American channel, ladies and gents. If you're watching this channel and expecting to find out loads about Donald Trump and America and all this stuff, this is not the channel for
brothers.
But they're cringe.
Well, some of them are our Anglo. Yeah, some of them are our Anglo brothers, and some of them are not. Is what I turn around and say. You know, it's look, our Anglo brothers, as far as I'm concerned, and I mean, I did this stream last week with the Australian and the Canadian chaps. They're our Anglo brothers, and even the people in New Zealand, but and some of the people in South Africa. But the guys in America, yeah, sure, okay, there are quite a lot of Americans who are descended from stock from the British Isles, and those guys, I suppose, could be our Anglo brothers if they so regard themselves. But I wouldn't say all white Americans are our Anglo brothers, because it's nonsense. They're not.
I mean, we do have to remember they were terrorists at the time. They didn't pay their taxes. They started the rebellion of law and authority. So.
Okay,
can we consider them brothers?
They're bad Anglos, but they're still Anglos.
Is there such a thing as bad Anglos? I'm not sure.
Okay, rebellious Anglos, teenage Anglos.
Yeah, maybe so, maybe so. There's actually an excellent stream on what's that guy's name? I'm gonna have to go and look it up now. Here we go. Won't take me long, guys. There is Apostolic Majesty has got one of the best history channels on YouTube by a long way. I would absolutely go and subscribe to that chap. and he's got a stream which is was the American War of Independence a mistake, and it's a pretty good stream. But as I pointed out in the comments, the main problem is that it doesn't address the basic fact that the American War of Independence was a civil war in America, really. There was always a large minority of Americans who still supported the crown, many of whom ended up moving to Canada after the war because they got persecuted. And to some degree, it was even a civil war in the UK because there were most of the Whigs in the UK, not all of them, but most of them actually supported American independence. There were British admirals and British generals who would not fight for Britain against the Americans. And then, of course, the other thing that you need to bring up when you talk about the American War of Independence, which again didn't come up in this stream because it wasn't totally relevant, is that the French, the Spanish, and also the Netherlands, the Holland, all ended up fighting on the side of the Americans. So Britain ended up fighting like most of the major powers in the world at the time, and didn't lose to those guys. You know, we lost in America eventually, but you know, bear in mind half the British upper classes didn't really support the British cause, and it's not really a surprise in that sense. And of course, ironically enough, the vast amount of money that France in particular spent on supporting the Americans pretty much directly led to the financial crisis that led to the French Revolution with all the shit that flowed from that. So, you know, ironically enough. So it's quite funny when you look at the Statue of Liberty in New York, for example, which was a French gift to the Americans. It's quite ironic, you know, in some ways, because like, yeah, well, the American gift to the French was the destruction of French society pre the Revolution and the terror. That was the American gift to the French. So, you know, there we go. I don't know what you got.
Brother wars, they say.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you get a more brother war than the American War of Independence? Not really. Not really. And you know, the British taxation of the Americans that started all this nonsense was because Britain had spent a bloody fortune during the 7 Years' War, what is known as the French and Indian Wars in North America, getting rid of the French out of North America, which was an enormous benefit to the colonists in the 13 colonies. And mostly, and actually entirely had been paid for by the British public rather than the American public. And so the British government afterwards thought, well, actually, we ought to be able to make some of this, a little bit of money back. And the taxation that was placed on the American colonies was actually very, very limited.
Mm.
So, you know, I don't know if anyone else has got opinions on the American War of Independence. I mean, everybody knows I'm an historical nut, so I'm happy to talk about this kind of stuff. And I think it's important for people to understand it because I don't think many people do these days.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've never really looked into the American stuff all that much. I mean, there's quite a lot of history there, even packed into that quite short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I've read quite a lot about the American War of Independence, and the British Army actually won more battles than it lost.
Yeah.
Like if you go through the battles of the American War of Independence, the British Army won most of them. But the thing is, as I said, they were also trying to fight the French and the Spanish and the Netherlands, particularly at sea, although the French actually sent quite a considerable army to America as well. Mm. They were providing the Americans with guns and muskets and all this kind of shit as well. And like I said, they spent so much money that it actually bankrupted the country.
Yeah, I've got something to say. I think it actually goes to show that there is a tremendous amount of pedigree in there basically being no ethnocentrism among Anglos whatsoever. And really, we're just a bunch of people who are tight asses, self-interested, economically rational, and this goes back hundreds of years. So if you think that there's any hope of any sort of revived ethno-nationalism, think again, because it's deeply ingrained and really goes back to, you know, the English Civil War, which is in many ways, I think the American Revolution is just an extension of that.
Oof, coming in with the black pills. Yeah. I don't know though. I kind of feel that it's still. I mean, it is several hundred years, but there's a lot of history before that where that just wasn't the case. I do maybe though the conception of Britain over something like the conception of England is definitely steeped in a lot of that sort of when would it be from, like post 1680 or something.
I'm not sure that I totally agree with that, to be honest with you. Like I said,
Why?
it's kind of, you guys were ignoring what I just said.
Really?
Yeah, because the American War of Independence, as I said, was basically a civil war. And it was also, to some degree, a civil war in Britain too.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, is that there's, you know, the idea that the mother country would spend all of that money, blood, treasure, effort defending the colonies, and then they turn around and say, oh, you know what, fuck this, we can just be independent and, you know, feather our own nests.
Yeah,
there's no loyalty there whatsoever. And what I'm saying is that is just actually a trait and characteristic of being an Anglo, really.
All right, there was no loyalty there from some of the elites. Yeah, but as I pointed out when I was talking about this to start with, there was always a large minority of Americans who were pro the crown.
Yeah, but who cares? Look at the root of history, the arrow of history. Who cares if there was a minority? I mean, whoop-de fucking do. We don't need a minority. We need a majority.
Well, you could also say that if you're talking about the English Civil War and Cromwell. Like, I would never have supported Cromwell. I would have been part of that minority that didn't. Apart from the fact he was anti-fun in every respect of fun, which is I do think that's anti-British. But you know, he didn't like dancing, he didn't like music, he didn't like pubs, like, you know, all this stuff, which is like to me pretty quintessentially British. He didn't like any of that stuff, so I would have been in a minority there. But I mean, you could say that about any race or group of people in the world. There's always been disagreements.
Yeah, well, even if you look at, say, the Spanish colonies, they all went the same route. So, you know, I kind of think that there is perhaps something.
Yeah, there was a difference. There was a difference. So the Spanish were never the majority in that place. Whereas, like, the difference with British colonies, like when I'm talking about British colonies, I'm not talking about Sierra Leone, which was set up for a place where all the slaves rescued by the Royal Navy could go. Yeah, I'm not talking about Singapore, which had a few governing British elites, but basically was an Asian place. I'm not talking about all of those new Commonwealth places. Yeah. I'm talking about the Old Commonwealth, which, like, as I said, back in the day, that was Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and also back in those days, South Africa. And with the exception of South Africa, all of those nations had a British majority in the country, which is something that the South American nations never had. There was never a Spanish majority in Mexico or in Argentina, you know?
So, I mean, the ruling elite were basically Spanish and still are.
Yeah, to some degree that's true, but the
elites are the only things that. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm using the word elite. I don't mean that. I mean the people that run the show.
Yeah.
You know, they're the only people that matter.
Yeah, to some degree, I think you're right, but I just don't think that the situation in Spanish America was in any way the same. And also, don't forget, America is the only colony that ever happened here. I mean, it certainly didn't happen in Canada, and one of the reasons it didn't happen in Canada was because all those British loyalists from the US 13 colonies moved to Canada.
Yeah, and there was essentially almost like a sort of like assortative mating. You know, it's like they self-selected to be loyalists. So of course, you know, of course it was going to be the case that that was not going to happen in Canada. and pretty much the same reason for Australia. Because if you look at the migration patterns out of Britain afterwards, that there was actually more migration to the United States than there was to Canada and Australia, which is actually, and I know that the British government at the time was sort of berating that, but of course there would have been a self-selection in that at the time.
I don't know. I don't know if you took Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa in, say, the second half of the 19th century. I'm not sure there was more immigration to America than all.
There was. I've seen the stat. It might be the case that they're equal. So in total,
the amount of
the amount of emigration to the United States was pretty much the same as Australia and Canada. But it is a bit of a smack in the face, right? Where your own country has huge lands in Australia and Canada, and half the people want to go to a fucking foreign country. What the fuck's that all about?
Well, some of it would have been propaganda. There was propaganda then, just as there is now. Yeah, I mean, not as bad as there is now, of course, but there was.
In what? What do you mean by propaganda?
Well, America was always trying to say, go west, young man, and blur, and blur, and like playing up the good points and playing down the bad points. There was that, but there was also the fact that with Australia, for example, like to be quite honest with you, and I love Australia, and I've lived here 20 years, so I do love it. But the middle of, like 2/3 of Australia is almost uninhabitable.
It's also a long way as well. I mean, that is that's something else to bear in mind. It's a much longer trip, and Canada's the same distance as it is to the United States, but there's less variety in the climate and opportunity. I guess
colder in winter, much colder in winter, sure.
I think I mean, obviously there was more opportunity to go to the United States. Let's be honest. I mean, much more.
It was easy to get across the Atlantic than it was to go to Australia or New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a much shorter trip, but it was much easier because there were many, many ships going across the Atlantic. I mean, like one of the things that Americans always forget is the Monroe Doctrine. Whereby European powers supposedly didn't interfere with North and South America. That was not enforceable by the Americans until after the First World War. The people who enforced the Monroe Doctrine were the Royal Navy. It was.
I mean, the Americans didn't really have a navy, didn't really have any kind of military until sort of post World War I, right?
Absolutely correct. Yes, I mean they built up quite a big military during the American Civil War, but their navy was still like, although they had a lot of ships, it was mostly coastal and river stuff that would have lasted 10 minutes in a war against, say, someone like the Royal Navy, which had real warships.
Again, I mean, even the American Civil War, again, it's actually quite interesting the amount of civil wars within the Anglosphere there's been in such short succession. Really, the English Civil Wars, the American Wars of Independence.
There's a lot of independent thought in Anglo people. Yeah, well, I think like Anglos tend to be individualists more so than quite a lot of continentals.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily think that there's anything particularly wrong with that. I'm certainly not going to sort of berate people for being that way inclined.
I think it's one of our good characteristics. But I don't think we're any more inclined to civil wars than, I mean, if you're going to really look at a vile civil war, like
Germany,
a really vile one, you can look at stuff that's gone on in Germany. You could also look at things like the Paris Commune, and the Paris Commune in many respects harks back to the French Revolution. And the vile mob of Paris, which took a big part in the French Revolution, and the Paris Commune harks back to that, but it also harked forward to the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Many of these people were basically communists or proto-communists anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think that Britain is any more inclined, or British people or Anglo-Celtic people are any more inclined to civil wars than anybody else.
No, sorry. I didn't mean to imply that. I think that's just a natural state. You have intramural competition between people vying for power. And in many ways, I actually think that we're actually living through another kind of civil war, but it's gone on to a different kind of technology. And I feel like mass migration is actually being used as a weapon. Because I think all civil wars come down to sort of an ideological difference. And I think what's going on at the minute is I kind of think it could be a new expression of a civil war, where
it's a cold civil war in some respects. Yeah,
we're going to win this war by basically, replacing the people.
Yep.
Which is like, it sounds crazy, but I mean, I don't know how else to frame it. Like, if you want to get the world that they want, well, just replace the population. Fuck it.
Well, it's not even just that, is it, Sergio? It's replacing the people, and at the same time brainwashing and indoctrinating all the younger people, the kids of the more patriotic people, in schools and universities, and constantly on the media with everything. I mean, I was talking about the BBC headlines just today, and I do this every week, and I don't follow mainstream media much. But for this stream, I've started looking at the BBC website's headlines, like just before the show every week. And it's the same thing week after week after week. If it's anti-white British, it's on there. If it's anti-straight white British male, it's most definitely on there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it never changes.
It's interesting because obviously when I log on to the BBC website, I get the international version.
No, and so you can look above and go and say, look, I mean, I get the international version. Sorry.
Yeah, I know that, but so I start off. When I log on, I get the world version, but you can click to UK, like you say.
That's what I do, yeah.
But I also noticed the same thing that you do, which is, so the first thing I saw today was mass grave at a sort of mass indigenous grave in Canada. That's the first thing I saw. It's like, oh, there's been a genocide in Canada of indigenous people. And then you scroll down, and it's about faggots and excuse my language, gay people and their struggle, like gay brown people or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I know better not to read it. It's like, but you just have to sort of go there, have a look, get a taste of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about gay people. I mean, even today, I didn't mention it because I had so many other funny things, in inverted commas, funny to mention. They're going on about the North Korea's only gay defector. Like, that matters, Why is that important? It's just, and it's constant all the time, drip, drip, drip. It's like every one of these adverts that people go on about with mixed race couples and mixed race kids, and it's constant, 100% of the time. This is what really gets on my nerves, and I guess it's so constant and it's such a drip, drip, drip that I think many of the people who live in the UK don't even bloody well notice it.
My siblings have begun to mention, or they've begun to voice their displeasure with this. So I never really talk politics with them at all. But I've noticed recently, in the past month or so, that they've started complaining about this stuff in general chit chat on WhatsApp without even being prompted. So things like, my brother said, I can't watch the news anymore because it's either COVID or, the plight of black people. And I've got my dad saying, I can't watch the TV anymore because of basically the same thing. Then I've got my mother's husband basically saying that he can't watch TV because it's just full of queers all the time. And it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. This is the kind of stuff that I would be saying. And now normies are saying it. So, and it's also sort of new to me because I don't really talk politics with my family or friends. So for them to bring it up unprompted is, to me, an indication that there's been a change, that even for the normie, there's now this sort of saturation that they don't like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Adaman, you're someone who lives in the UK. What do you reckon about some of
No, no, I think that's right. The problem is it's like people are talking about it. A lot of people are talking about it, but it's almost too late now. Like it's almost that the moment at which people started saying, "Oh, hang on a minute, this is ridiculous," is almost at the point where there's just no turning it back anymore. Because I even
Yeah.
wonder if like the idea of defunding the police, if that would even work at all. Um, not defunding the police, defunding the BBC.
that?
Um,
Well, what
because
about the private sector? The private
yeah,
sector is just as bad.
yeah. I mean, you could make an argument for the fact that Channel 4 doesn't have any real investors to keep happy, but I mean, someone else has pointed out ITV does this massively,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
they've got no excuse
yeah.
at all. So
And Sky is one of the strange ones to me because Sky Australia is pretty right wing. Like it's been one of the few channels which has questioned the coronavirus lockdowns and so on. Whereas Sky in the UK, from what I can see,
it's
is
the
like very
complete
left wing.
opposite. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really weird. It's the same company.
yeah.
I
I
mean,
was
is it because they think that there's this appetite for this crap in the UK, or is it maybe just different management?
I'm always a little bit shocked actually when I see in my recommended Sky News Australia, and just from the headlines alone on like YouTube on their little YouTube channel, it's like a complete night day difference to what we get in the UK. I mean, in the UK, we had there was one particular one a while ago where I think it was Bolton, the Sky News UK
Mm.
like anchorman, one of the big ones. He was interviewing a former like police commissioner for or head of police in Scotland, and the guy basically just came out and said, and he was talking about, well, the problem is actually that we can't, because of accusations of racism, we can't actually do what we need to do our job properly. And this guy, this Bolton, very quickly like shifted this away and moved on to something else. As in Australia, on Sky News Australia, that just seems to be the norm. They're like Fox News for Australia.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep, that's very
Yep.
true. Yeah, it is very true. I mean, I don't know. I'm hearing like a lot of people who with pretty normie views saying this British news broadcasting thing might make a difference. I just doubt it because they just seem so normie based.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, I think that the problem is like with defund the BBC or any of that sort of stuff. I don't know if it's just that these institutions are so full of people that have been radicalized into almost a proselytized sort of leftist stance that they will literally just take those institutions down with them, or
Mm.
if there is something else behind it. I mean, I know sometimes certain people like to point to the fact that some of this stuff sort of bleeds out from the financial sector. I'm not sure if that's strictly true, but I do think there's an argument to be made for the fact that, like social media companies, so many of these social media companies make absolutely fuck all money, but yet they're
Yeah.
just kept in the runnings.
No, yeah. I mean, look, I think our little group of people and the people who watch us are mostly a bit beyond the idea that there's the cathedral as a conspiracy theory. I don't think most people think that. There is definitely a push to destroy our history and culture and the connection of the current generation of Brits, for example, to British history. Because it was all bad slavery shit and what have you, and all the other nonsense they come up with. That's definitely something which is happening. Let me ask Limbu, because Limbu I know is a young chap and he's still like going through his education. Do you find there's a lot of anti-British stuff?
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of anti-British stuff. I think I mentioned it earlier. A few weeks back, that they were promoting anti-Cecil stuff. They were talking mainly about the negatives of the British Empire, especially in Asia. They didn't mention the fact how they somewhat revolutionized India with all of its enlightened Western education and all that stuff. So
Yeah, and just to point out to people, like Limbu is not going to some state comprehensive somewhere, by the way. This is a pretty decent school as far as I understand it. So it's like infected everywhere, pretty much. As I say, Limbu is not some crappy state comprehensive in Bolton or somewhere. He's at a decent school, and they're still coming up with this crap. Because, the teacher training colleges are totally infected with it, and the guys going there from university are totally infected with it. And I think what Adaman was just saying is I think that, like, the guys who are in the BBC and run the BBC, they won't give a shit if the BBC is defunded and becomes much smaller. They'll just go off and get jobs in other parts of the media. I mean, I'm in favour of defunding the BBC because I don't really think old age pensioners should have to pay so much money for a service so many people don't watch. But
they don't pay for it though. OAPs don't pay for the BBC. They get a free TV license.
When did that happen?
Didn't they?
No, they just put it up for OAPs, Sergio.
Did they?
They used to. Yeah, they did. They like it used to be. You got a free one, and then the BBC got rid of that last year. I'm pretty sure that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very recent, but they've brought in TV licenses for pensioners now.
Oh well, I mean, who cares? I mean, it's pretty cheap anyway. So I mean,
yeah.
No, it's quite a few hundreds of pounds, which for a pensioner is quite a lot of money.
No, it's not.
80?
180, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like what, £13 a month, something like that. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, but
a lot of money.
In one lump for someone who's actually living on their pension.
No, you can pay it by direct debit.
But why should you? But why should you?
What do you mean? Why? What do you mean? Why should you?
Why should you have to? Is what I'm trying to say. Why should you not have to buy into that? If people want to pay.
Listen. I'm not a fucking libertarian. There should be a state broadcaster, and it should be pumping out pro-British propaganda 24/7. That's what it should be.
Yeah, and if it was doing that, then I'd agree with you. But damn well it's doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, but this is the problem. Sorry, Limbu. I'll finish off really quickly. But this is like I remember Morgoth said this maybe like 2 years ago. He said, I'm for defunding the BBC. And I thought to myself, that is just like giving up the institution. I think that, it's got a nice, huge archive. It is a cultural icon. It should, we should be trying to salvage it, not just like...
How?
Well, I mean, that's actually a very tough question, and that sort of straddles everything, because essentially the whole media elite is, skewing to the left.
But you can't just change the director of the BBC. You can't even just change all the board of the BBC. You'd have to change like the people who run the news. You'd have to change like 3/4 of the people who work there.
Yeah, but therein lies the problem. But getting back to like, if I had £1 billion and I was going to have a startup company to replace the BBC and be a right-wing version, I look at it and think to myself, who the fuck am I going to employ who's actually got the credentials to be right-wing? Because the whole industry is stuffed from top to bottom with leftists.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's not the talent there. There's not even the talent there to staff a right-wing media corporation. That's the fundamental problem, that all of our cultural institutions are just awash with leftists.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Sorry, Limbu.
Carry on, man. Limbu, your turn.
I was going to say something on that. The BBC as a whole, we should keep the idea of defunding it. It's British institution. We shouldn't be doing that at all. And I agree that it should be traditional. I mean, not to take a very heavy hand to the NRX here, but Robert Conquest's law, Rule 2, that any organization not explicitly or constitutionally right-wing will sooner or later become left-wing. Yeah. And that definitely did happen to the BBC. It did essentially, it been to the idea of, culture is consent, and it should essentially live up to that. And yeah, the BBC should be something which will take reforming, but then we don't know how to reform it. That's a problem. Like Duke said. Okay,
I actually know how to reform this. So what we
Go
can
on
do
then.
is we can strip the BBC down to a bare bones operation. So what we do is we just go into the archives and we scrap everything that's being commissioned right now, and we just rerun Steptoe and Son, stuff from the 50s, 40 Towers, Dad's Army. We just rerun this 24/7, and we actually sack everybody, and we just turn it into like a rerun of all the classics. And then we have a bare bones 6 o'clock news staffed by one guy. So you only need one base guy, right? One base guy to read out the news at 6 o'clock every day, and then the rest of it is reruns from the archive. Sorted. And then we spend the next 20 years brainwashing the next generation to be ultra base right wing people, and then we bring the BBC back up again. That is how we do it.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, one of the things.
Carry on, Alan. Carry on.
Oh, right. I was just going to say, like, one of the things I keep saying to my friends and relatives, which always they seem to be quite receptive of, is I'll say, well, one of the arguments that they'll come up with for why we should keep the BBC is, oh, well, you know, what about all these old great shows? And I'm like, right, but half of those old great shows they don't even play anymore. Like they don't play. I only just saw for the first time the other day, Yes, Prime Minister. I hadn't seen that rerun on TV in donkey's years.
Yeah,
and
that'd be on like UK Gold.
Yeah, it wasn't on BBC. It was on something else. But yeah. So even then, like even that argument that they like to wheel out. Oh, you know, what about all these great old shows? That it doesn't matter because they don't play half of them anyway. They might do only Fools and Horses at Christmas, and that's about it.
Yep, they're problematic. Most of it, like Dad's Army, for example, is like pro-British Empire. You know, I've heard people say that.
Yeah.
It's I see what Sojo's saying. I see what Adam's saying. I see what Limbu's saying. I mean, if it was only as simple as what Sojo was saying, and if only any British government had the will to do that, which of course they most certainly don't.
But what I'm actually suggesting could work. I mean, it's extreme, but that's how we could actually do that.
If you could get a government that would do it, yeah. If you could get a government that would do it, yeah.
And you could basically slash the cost of it to nothing because you've basically got like one studio for a news broadcast, and you're just pumping out the archive all day. So you could actually get rid of the fee.
I'll be honest. I think what the British government should do is they should nationalise the BBC archive. Right, all that old stuff should be nationalised and should belong to the British government, which is not my ideal solution, but I think it's the only one we can do. And then they should defund the BBC, and like let the BBC and all the left-wing wanks who are in it and run it go off and do their shit. You know, because I think that's the only thing that will happen. It's the best thing that could happen. You know, I mean, yeah, sure, all that BBC archive that should belong to the British people. Because we paid for it after all, and the actual BBC itself, the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, should be defunded, and the only people who should have to pay for it are people who want to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that's not going to happen because, in many ways, the BBC is a propaganda. It's actually a global propaganda arm of the UK state, in the sense that it's got all these foreign services that it's used for pumping out.
Cool.
You know, dildo.
You could separate those guys off quite easily. You know.
Yeah, but but the thing is that it's you know they're actually arms of this sort of dildo gay imperialism, and actually, if anything, I would like to destroy those aspects of the BBC and keep the domestic arm. I don't care about our reach abroad and spreading faggotry around the world. I just don't.
Well,
care.
I used to care about it. Like in say the 1980s, yes, it was useful because then it was pro-British and pro-Western, but it ain't anymore for sure. Because what is Western today? I mean, Western today is, as you rightly say, it's
the dildo and the whip. That's what it is.
Yeah, rainbow flags and dildos. Yeah, absolutely right. I don't disagree with that at all. I got no problems with agreeing with that at all. It's because, you know, what does Britain stand for these days internationally? The same shit that America does, basically. None of which is good. Don't disagree with any of that. So yeah, I still think that no one in Britain should have to pay for a TV license for the BBC if they don't want to watch the BBC. And I agree with Puffwagon in the chat, said he's never had a TV license. And I will say this for the people in the chat, there are some very good channels on YouTube where you can find out how you can legally not pay for your TV license. Go for it. Because if I was still in UK, I sure wouldn't be paying one. No way would I be giving money to those monsters. Because I think the BBC are monsters.
What's the Australian equivalent to the BBC?
The ABC, which is just as bad, but there's no TV license.
Oh, okay.
So
they just get money from the government.
But do they run advertising?
No, I think they basically get tax money from the government, but no one individually has to pay them. And they are, and the ABC in Australia are just as bad as the BBC. And from what I hear from Canadian friends, the CBC in Canada exactly the same, just as bad. Like all these Commonwealth nations set up an equivalent of the BBC, and they've all gone just as left wing for the same reason, because the people coming out of the universities are totally indoctrinated Marxists, pretty much, for the most part.
One thing which I have to defend America on is that on their PBS they reject most homosexual TV shows, so that's one good starting point.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got to look at PBS is like totally funded by individual donations in America. So this is what I'd like the BBC to be. It should only get the money that people choose to give it. And if that happened, then things would change a bit. They'd have to, because people wouldn't pay for a lot of it. Because a lot of people wouldn't pay for a lot of the shit that the BBC comes out with.
Well, I don't agree with that. People pay out of the nose for Netflix, and that's some of the most pos shit going.
Oh yeah, I agree. But Netflix even is going down these days. No,
it's not. It's growing. It's growing at a rapid rate.
No. It's in individual nations. It's actually not doing so well now because they're producing so much shit.
No, I don't think that's the case. I think it's if there is a reduction in the growth rate, that's because they're probably reaching saturation point.
Well, all right. If you say so, Joe, I'm going to disagree. I just think a lot of people are not. I know people who used to be subscribed to Netflix who are not now. Yeah, but
it's sort of fad-like, isn't it?
What I also don't understand is why would anyone subscribe to Netflix when you don't have to? Like anything that Netflix produces that you want to watch, it's quite easy to do so without being subscribed to Netflix.
But no, it's not though.
Well, it is. You've got to hoist the Jolly Roger on your internet, mate.
Yeah, but I mean, therein lies the problem, Duke. My boomer parents, my idiotic, can't operate a computer parents aren't going to be able to, go on BitTorrent or Kodi or whatever the fuck it is these days.
No, you've just got to put a search into Google or DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, and they download viruses, and then I get messages.
No. I don't. It's all you got to do is look for like certain things that everybody knows. Like, for example, just to give people a rough idea here, you just look for 1, 2, 3 movies or Pootlocker, for God's sake, and you don't download viruses from those guys.
Right, but it's still beyond. It's still sort of been pushed beyond the threshold where people will just say, "Oh fuck it, I'll pay for it." I mean, this happened a few years ago. I remember pointing out to some friends at work. Oh, this was actually quite a while ago. I said it's that torrenting is now just starting to get beyond the point where it's actually easy enough for the person in the average household to put the effort into it. And
I don't torrent, and I haven't. I mean, occasionally I have when it was something I really, really wanted to watch. But I don't by and large. But there are at least 24 websites I can think of that basically any new movie that comes out will be on there within 2 weeks of it coming out.
Right, but these services are cheap and easy, and
£12. I mean, come on, £12. It's nothing.
Well, I'd sooner not give those evil bastards Netflix 12 quid, but that's just me.
You're an ideologue. That's why. Most people are not. They don't care.
To interject really quickly, there's breaking news. Boris Johnson marries Carrie Symonds in secret Westminster ceremony.
Oh,
Oh,
The
yeah.
bastard did it.
So he's just
His
become
second-
even more of a cuck.
Yeah,
Okay.
his fifth wife, I'm pretty sure. What a sad man.
Fifth? Really?
Yeah.
Is that his fifth?
Yeah, fifth or
You're
fourth.
kidding me?
I'm not,
Jeez.
no.
Is that true, guys? His fifth wife? I mean, he's not even that old.
Where is it? 1, 2. Never mind, 2. Three. I mean, 3. He's only had 3 wives, but still.
Only 3. Okay, well, I managed with like 1.5, but there we go.
Yeah, disappointing.
I mean, he's just going to make him even more of a cuck, if you ask me. I mean, he basically did what she told him when they were just boyfriend and girlfriend. God knows what he's going to do now. He's his wife. Jeez.
my message is going off like mad. Someone's just going, "Oh fuck, no!"
Yeah, it's just appalling. Jeez.
But I'd like to congratulate our new Prime Minister, Carrie Symonds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right.
That's a message I got. That wasn't me, but I stand by the sentiment.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with it totally. I mean, I don't understand how this guy couldn't, he's supposed to be the Prime Minister of Britain, which effectively should make him like one of the top, say, 12 most powerful people in the world. And he does what he's told by this fox, who's not even all that cute.
Duke and his opinions on women. Mad.
Cardamom. I only wish he had more Turkish harem impulses, Alexander Johnson, because if he did, then she'd be put in her place as being decorative and for sex, and that'd be about it.
Yeah, he's a womanizer in like all the worst ways.
Yeah,
He's not even cool about it.
I got nothing wrong with blokes who like women, who chase women and all the rest of it, but keep women where they belong, decorative, in the background. Certainly not telling you what to do politically.
I probably imagine that Nicholas II's wife probably told him what to do behind closed doors.
Well, the Russian guy, yeah. I think that's quite possible. She was German, though, wasn't she, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's not too bad if you've actually got a based missus, but...
Oh, I know. You know what? When they turn around and say behind every great man there stands a strong woman, that's actually not true. It really isn't.
You don't think so?
No, not at all, mate. I really don't think so. I think women at best are entirely neutral as to what a guy does, like in real life. Outside of his family stuff, I think they're just neutral. Most women don't have good brains in terms of politics and stuff like that. They just don't. They don't, because they don't understand it very well. This is why giving women the vote was absolutely and always is a mistake. Don't get me wrong. I'm in favour of household suffrage at best. I'm not a one man one vote guy, even for all men. But women certainly shouldn't have the vote because they vote for stupid reasons.
Wait, so what about Queen? What's your stance on Queen Victoria then?
Queen Victoria was a fine, upstanding woman and a good head of state in the sense that she was extremely patriotic. She was extremely kind to animals, which is one of the things that is a defining feature of the British. But if you read her diaries, I mean, yeah, she was very patriotic indeed, and she certainly identified with the British people, which is something that the so-called elites in inverted commas don't anymore.
She didn't really have any swagger, did she? Not like Elizabeth.
Well, oh no, she did have swagger. Queen Victoria had plenty of swagger, but she would have also had Britain. No, she did, but she would have also had Britain in a war like every 6 months. If you read her diaries, every 6 months Britain would have been fighting somebody else. I mean, as it was, there was only 1 year in Queen Victoria's reign that Britain wasn't fighting a war. And actually, the same thing was true. The same thing was true of Queen Elizabeth up until when? Not long ago, anyway. The same thing was true of her. Queen Elizabeth II, I beg your pardon. But in general terms, like women's political ideas are balmy for the most part. You know, it's just the way they're made. They're not designed to work out how to do politics, and they don't. Like I have like my late woman was a very intelligent woman. She had a master's degree in nursing, but like her political ideas were shit. And she started off when I first met her. She was a complete liberal type person, you know. And as an Australian girl, she was very like pro-Aboriginals and all the rest of it. Then we did this great big massive outback trip right up through the centre and then across the top end. By the time we'd done that, her opinions on Aboriginal people, because she'd seen many of them, had changed somewhat. So, you know, but yeah, the women are like basically. I had no time for women in politics, and no time for women's political views either. But then, you know, I think women are decorative. I think they're amusing. I think obviously they're vastly important because, you know, we have to produce children and all the rest of it. But beyond that, I don't have a lot of time for them, and don't expect loyalty from them in the sense that you get it from blokes, because they don't understand that either. Like, so long as they're in love with you, it's great. But if they ever fall out of love with you, they'll press that eject button in a second.
I just like.
And won't even think about it. Won't even think about it either.
They smell nice and they sound nice, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, all of that stuff. Yeah, sure. Agree with all that.
Straight up, that's all that matters.
John McNamara, if I make you feel like a feminist, then you need to become more manly.
Oh.
I'm sorry. This is one of the things we are facing in the West, is that men are becoming less and less manly. I don't know if you guys have listened to these. Like I listen to lots of streams and stuff, and there are young chaps, particularly in North America, like America and Canada, and they've all got this same kind of like soy boy voice. Like they almost all sound the same. And I don't know, what is it? Lack of testosterone because they don't smoke? I don't know what it is, but for fuck's sake, man, sound like men, for God's sake.
You notice how accents are becoming more boring.
Oh yeah, because they're becoming homogenized.
Yeah, but they could be homogenized in a good way, I suppose, like a sort of like a mid-Atlantic accent for the Americans.
No.
But that's not the case. And when I listen to old recordings of English people or Americans, they sound so much more refined. And now this kind of Californian uptalk is just so sad. It's the American accent is a sort of shadow of its former self, in my view.
Yeah, you always end every sentence on a question, you know.
That's what I mean by the Californian uptalk.
Yeah.
But also the regional differences between Americans, and unless you live in New York and you've got a really strong sort of like or Boston accent. But I get the impression that a lot of these accents, regional accents in America, are quite literally just disappearing.
Yeah, definitely.
Also depends. It depends how often, like, they're on things that we watch, and particularly on mainstream media. I just don't think they get on them so much. You know, because they're so selective now who they will allow on the mainstream media, particularly.
Well, no, even if you listen to streams, which could be a sort of would give you insight to different regional accents, but I mean, Charlemagne's from the south, and I can hear a little bit of an accent there, but
not much.
Not much. And even between the Canadians and the Americans, there's
it's difficult.
The gap between them is diminishing. It's like, is this guy Canadian? There's only subtle hints that give it away, whereas it would have been more pronounced in the past. past. So
I'll
you
tell
know,
you, so Joe, I agree with that, and I'll tell you why. Let's say 20 years ago, I could almost always tell the difference between a Canadian and an American because of the way they spoke. And also, I could usually tell the difference between a Kiwi and an Australian, which is harder, but I could usually do that. And I got off with a couple of girls just because I could do that. Just because like they were amazed I knew they were a Canadian rather than an American or a New Zealander rather than an Australian. But yeah, and these days, yes, it's becoming harder and harder. You're quite right. It is. It's becoming harder and harder.
Sorry,
welcome
lads.
back, member. Welcome back, member.
My laptop charge died.
No worries. But yeah, I do think this is true. Adam, do you think that's also true in the UK? Are the UK accents kind of dying off a bit?
Sometimes it seems like it. I'm not sure if it's happening just yet.
The only thing I've noticed is like these guys from London who, for some weird reason, try to sound like black guys, which I've never understood.
Yeah, I mean, there is a respect to which, you know, I live in the southeast, like really, really far southeast, and if you talk to some really, really older people, they will tell you, if they don't have it themselves, they'll tell you that they almost had a bit of like a Yeovil sort of tilt. But now we just sound like Pound Shop London everywhere.
Yeah, I can actually speak. I can speak to that because I come from Berkshire. But if you think about essentially west of London, there's a part in Slough called Britwell, and essentially a whole bunch of Londoners from the West End were transplanted out into Britwell. So this is Berkshire. So if you actually go out to the west of Berkshire, say Newbury, the people there have like a West Country twang to their accent.
Yeah, they certainly used to. Yeah,
they still have a county accent, but from where I was in Berkshire, essentially my family some of them came from Middlesex, from London. So essentially they're just migrants coming from London post-war. And essentially my kind of people who ended up in Berkshire basically just are refugees from London. So in that way we've kind of wiped out the individualistic nature and regional identity of that particular county, and I think that's a sad thing, actually.
Well, when I lived in Berkshire, like in the mid-1990s for a while, there were two main accents that I noticed. That there was very posh, received pronunciation Oxford English. There were lots of people like that. And then, like as Adam was saying, as you were saying, there were in places this almost kind of carrot cruncher West Country accent was still quite common. But
yeah, they're called people chat and stuff like that. I mean, you still get people like that today, but it's rarer and it's much further west.
Yeah. It's being destroyed for sure, but I mean, this is all part of like all regional and national differences being destroyed by this corporate globalist monster, which is like what most of us are against, isn't it?
I just want to say that Barn Door says that Reading is a dump. I can attest to that. Reading, if you ever
totally agree. Reading is a dump.
If you have the unpleasant,
Reading was a dump. Reading was a dump 25 years ago.
Yeah, but now it is quite literally a third world dump. If you go to the Oracle Centre, it's just like, where am I? Somalia? It's just an absolute shithole.
Yeah, it was always a dump. The only thing I liked in Reading was the giant lion, which is
at the courthouse.
Yeah, which is a memorial to the Royal Berkshire Regiment who were killed in Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's where there was a stabbing there actually last year.
What a surprise! But yeah, that was the only thing I liked in Reading, to be honest. I went to a dawn service there once on Armistice Day. Yeah, that was about it. But I don't know, guys. Like I said, I mean, this is all symptoms of the same thing. Like we're being attacked on all fronts, basically. When I say we, the real British people, the real Anglo-Celtic people, whether they be in Britain or whether they be in Canada or Australia, New Zealand, We're being attacked on all fronts constantly.
But some of this is just the effects of modernity and internal migration from our own people.
Yeah,
well, no, I mean, if I look at my own ancestry in England, and well, from the UK actually, so I family from the north of England, family from Aberdeen, Bible bashing, people from Aberdeen, from the Isle of Man, finally end up in London. That's internal migration over a very short period of time, a couple of 100 years. So even there's a kind of deracination internally, which is a result not of mass immigration or anything like that, but of just simply modernity and sort of modern life.
Yeah, but Sojo, there is a huge difference between a very short period of time, like in inverted commas, 200 years, and the shit we've seen. All right, I suppose you could say from 1948, but really from about 1990 has been the really, really bad stuff in the UK. So that's not 200 years, that's more like 25, 30 years for the worst of it. And certainly not more than, say, 60, 65 years. So, 200 years, if you didn't have that last bit that I was just talking about, if it was just that internal stuff going on over the relatively short period, which I agree it is, of 200 years, I think everyone could quite happily cope with that, and it wouldn't change too much. It's a bit like I don't think that Britain's going to fall apart if it had 1,000 Sikhs in it. I don't think Britain's going to fall apart if it had 10,000 Sikhs in it. But if you're going to put 250,000 Sikhs in it, well, that starts to change things.
Well, I'm not actually sure that's the case. I think South Africa is a good example of actually what quote unquote white people can put up with. I can see a scenario where white people could be an absolute minority in the UK and really doesn't change anything with their day-to-day life.
Are you talking about South Africa today, or are you talking about South Africa?
Yeah, I'm talking about South Africa today.
No, well then you're totally wrong.
Well, but basically,
look. The South Africans left in South Africa now are of two sorts. There's one sort which I suspect is the majority, who are the people who cannot afford to leave because they just don't have enough money to do so, and they don't have the correct passport, etc., to do so. And the other ones are the ones who say, no, fuck this, like I'm an African, South African, and there are many, many Afrikaners who think this way, who say, look, my family's been here since 1652 or whatever it is, and I'm damn well not going to leave, and partly because if they did leave, they would find it very difficult to live in a relatively small and confined place like Europe. So I don't think that South Africa is a good example at all for that reason.
But it is a good example. It's actually happening right now. It's still a functioning state.
Well, yeah, is it? I don't know how much you know about South Africa. It's a semi-functioning state at best.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Is that look how far things have to go for it to just to begin to fall apart.
I just said to you that the majority of people, the majority of white people who are still in South Africa, I would say the majority of them are in the position that they cannot leave. Like they don't have enough money and they don't have the right passport. When I left South Africa,
I don't see why that matters.
Well, how do you leave then?
Hang on,
I'm not talking about them leaving.
Why do 27% of whites vote for the ANC?
They don't.
They do.
No, they don't. Mate. I'd need to look at those figures. I'd be amazed if it was that high. I would be absolutely amazed if it was half that high even.
I think I've seen those figures actually.
The only and when was this? What year was that?
The last election, 2019.
Yeah, I would be amazed if that was true, mate. I really would. I just don't believe those figures. Did they come from the ANC? If they were South African figures, they're obviously not true.
Well, it's done by Pew. But who's the Democratic Alliance? What are they? Are they like a centre-left Lib Party or?
There you go. You've got to remember, and this makes me sad, but like a lot of the English-speaking South Africans were always pretty left-wing. Not all of them, but quite a lot of them were pretty left-wing.
And they haven't
part
been
of that
by what's happened.
No, because they're dimwits and they're liberals and they've been brainwashed at university like everybody else.
You mean like British people?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, because when you were describing like South Africa earlier, it just sounded like Bradford to me. You know, there are white families stuck in it, like the last families in their street.
Yep.
And they can't leave.
Can't move. Yep.
Because they're in a council house and all the ones out of the area are too expensive.
Listen, you've got to understand that what there is in South Africa, and like there is an underclass of Afrikaners in South Africa who back in the day would work on South African railways and stuff like that because they had reserved jobs on that sort of stuff. Yeah. And these are guys who are basically the equivalent of really basic working class people in the UK. And those guys can't move because they don't have the right passport and they don't have enough money. Even when I left South Africa, and I'd been doing pretty good jobs, yeah, turning my rand into Australian dollars destroyed all my savings. Like I was pretty well off in South Africa, but when I moved to Australia, I sure wasn't. Because a rand in South Africa when I moved in 2000, so I'm going back 20 odd years now, but when I moved, a rand in South Africa would pretty much buy you at least as much as an Australian dollar or a British pound would in the country. But once you turn that money into like foreign currency, so you took your rand and you turned it into Australian dollars, it was like, it wasn't halving or quartering it. It was more than making it less than a quarter of what it was worth originally. And that was back in 2000. Now it would be far, far worse. But most of these guys could not afford to leave, even if they had the right passport to enable them to leave. Yeah? Like, because, a lot of these guys don't have British passports. They don't have Netherlands passports. They have a South African passport. And because they're white, they're not treated as refugees. Because,
that's going to be the same issue here, though.
You can't be a refugee if you're white. Impossible, as far as I can work out, in the modern world. Refugees have to be brown and black.
Right, but that's going to be the same problem we're going to have here, though, isn't it? And
exactly true. Exactly true.
Yeah, but then you're just going to have the sort of lib middle class is just going to stick with it because they can afford to move to their still largely white areas. And
and if there are any white people still voting for the ANC in South Africa, and as I say, I would dispute it's 27%. I really would. I think that those figures sound like a con to me. But if there are white people still voting for the ANC, and I'm sure some silly wanks will still do so, they will be those white libs. Who even when their daughter or their mother is killed by a black guy will say, oh, well, it's emergent behaviour,
Although it's kind of weird that because they've got coloured, right, on this graph, which is for multiracial people, right?
Yeah, coloured people are a specific group in South Africa, yes.
They only vote for the ANC at 30%, which I find kind of weird.
Yeah, no, you will find that the coloured people, by and large, in the, let me think now, the Western Cape, mostly the coloured guys and the white guys are kind of in a loose alliance because they don't like the ANC.
Fighters?
I beg your pardon?
Who are the economic freedom fighters?
Oh, they're an offshoot of the ANC, I think.
Right.
If they're the guys I think you're talking about, the guys with the berets and stuff. Yeah, they're an extreme communist offshoot of the ANC, who the ANC uses basically. Like those guys will demand something really ridiculous, like all these guys' farms, we just want them, and the guys get chucked out without a penny, and the ANC will then take half of that, if you see what I mean. Well, they use them as a stalking horse.
10% of whites in South Africa have a favourable view of them.
bollocks. That's just not true. I'm sorry, that's just
Well,
a lie.
hang on. I mean, I'll tell you what. The first introduction I had to South African politics was I was following a vlogger. Right, he was a YouTuber, and he was English, right? And he
Right,
moved
yeah.
down there, and he lived in Johannesburg.
Oh,
And within
God,
about 3
yeah.
months of him being there, he was literally a vegan, soy latte sipping man bun,
Right, yeah.
fucking open relationship retard, right?
All
And
right, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ammon, but one thing I would say, and then I'll let you go on. If you want a decent South African YouTuber, go and follow Conscious Caracal.
Yeah, I do watch him now. But like, this is the
Yeah.
thing. This was what I was watching. This is what I saw, and this was a long time ago, maybe 6 years ago. And that was the Johannesburg white man scene.
Listen, I always detested Johannesburg, even when the South Africa was won by the white government. It was a shithole. I always thought it was New York on the felt. So I never liked it.
Sure, but
Joburg was always a shithole. Pretoria is quite a nice city, or it used to be.
Right,
but Joburg was always a crap hole.
But people in Johannesburg still have a vote. So I mean, you
Yeah,
can say it's a
of course they
shithole.
do. Yeah, of course they do. But it was a shithole.
Yeah, sure, but it's still dictating.
Levels of cope off the charts. Fuck me.
It's still dictating
hang
a large part of that country.
hang on. Let me try this once again. What you've got to do, Sojo, is if you're an Englishman and you don't know South Africa, which I presume you don't, you certainly didn't live there 15 years like I did, is you've got to look at Joburg as being like South Africa's equivalent of London. That's how much it relates to the rest of the country.
Okay, mate, but the fact is that the data says that 27% of white people vote for the ANC.
No, the lying data says that.
Okay, according to you, because you don't like what it says, basically.
No, because I know it's not true.
Oh, it's just a globalist conspiracy, isn't it? Yeah.
I never said it was a globalist conspiracy. I just said
what is it?
There is no possibility.
What is it?
There is no possibility whatever that 27% of the remaining white people in South Africa now support the ANC. That's an impossible figure.
How can that be? Why? How can it be impossible? And if so, why are they putting
because
out
many of the liberal South Africans, liberal white South Africans, and who I have to say, sadly, were very often Anglos, left. They did what was called the chicken run long before I left.
Wait, so
they left from 1990 onwards. So the remaining people in South Africa now, are overwhelmingly, well, actually, there are a lot more Afrikaner than there used to be. Yeah, because the white South Africans, when I first moved there in the middle 80s, white South Africans were about 60% Afrikaner and about 40% English speaking. They weren't all the English speaking guys weren't all English. Okay, some of them were Irish, some of them were from European backgrounds. Okay, and all that meant was because everyone was bilingual pretty much who grew up in South Africa. When they said you were either Afrikaans speaking or English speaking, it was just the language used at home. Okay, everyone could basically understand everybody else if they were born in the country. But by and large, with many exceptions, the Anglos tended to be more liberal than the Afrikaners. Okay, but the Anglos, because many of them still had British passports or were able to get British passports, or sometimes Australian passports and what have you. But many of the Anglos left from 1990 onwards as the country, after it got taken over by the ex-terrorist Nelson Mandela and the ANC, went downhill and downhill and downhill, which it's continued to do ever since. And many of these guys left, and they went to Australia, they went to UK and all the rest of it, right? And that was the guys who could afford to do so and had the right passports to do so. The guys who are left in South Africa now, as I tried to tell you guys at the start of this particular conversation, are of two types. One of them is people who are too poor to leave. And the guys who were poor in South Africa were almost all Afrikaners rather than English speakers. because English working class guys, by and large, didn't move to South Africa. I mean, yeah, there were British miners who moved there in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. But basically, their earnings there soon turned them middle class. And also they had British passports, and if they wanted to, could fuck off. Whereas, like, you know, you've absolutely no qualifications whatsoever, Afrikaner guys, well, they can't move because they haven't got enough money, they don't have the right passport. And the other guys who are staying there are people like Conscious Caracol, who is a YouTuber that I absolutely suggest people go and subscribe to. And there are one or two others as well, who want to stay there because that's where they come from. Because the white guys have been in South Africa since 1652, which is like, you know, longer than white people have been in Australia by like 100 years plus.
Okay, so the poor working class Afrikaners vote for the freedom, like the nationalist Freedom Party, the Afrikaner Party, right? The orange, whatever it is.
Some of them do, yeah.
Well, most of them, right?
Probably,
and then,
yeah.
so who are these white people voting for the?
I just don't look. I don't believe the figures, mate. I just do not believe.
No. Hang on a minute. I'm saying, who are the white people voting for the Democratic Alliance? Who are these nutcases?
Okay, there will be a certain number of morons in Johannesburg, like we said. You know, the same morons who vote for the Labour Party in London. Those same sort of people who are gay, or they want to be gay, or they think being gay is better than being straight. All these crazy positions, which we're told all the time, are normal now. Yeah. No, poor whites get no benefits, Bandor, in South Africa. Nothing. Some poor black people get benefits, but poor whites get absolutely jack shit and never have. But yeah,
you know what? I've actually got more sympathy for the Afrikaners than I have got for the Anglos. If I'm being absolutely honest.
Yeah, because I don't in South Africa, I don't disagree with you. In South Africa,
at least the Afrikaners vote for their own like nationalist party. But if you've got like white Anglos who are under this delusion that there's going to be some sort of like liberal sort of kumbaya, hold hands under the rainbow, and we're going to make things great, or we're going to sort of muddle through it, well then fuck them. They're idiots.
Yeah, but let me be clear. There are plenty of conservative white Anglos in South Africa as well. They're not all left-wing fighters.
Yeah, but if they had any sense, they'd vote for the Afrikaner Party, because I think I would.
And many of them do. So don't go running away with the idea that like all Anglo-speaking, English-speaking white South Africans are like left-wing morons. They're not. But those ones who are left-wing morons, I have the utter contempt for them that I have for the left-wing morons who live in London or anywhere else in the UK.
But it's like 60% of the Anglo South Africans vote for the Democratic Alliance. That's a pretty bad figure, let's be honest.
Yeah, and the Democratic Alliance, to be fair, is like not the most left-wing party in South Africa.
It's a liberal party, right? And it's a coalition between like Anglo whites and essentially like the Asians brought in by the British Empire, right? I can understand why they would vote for that party, but I'm still amazed that as a minority that you wouldn't form a hardcore white bloc. I just can't, with the ANC in power, I just cannot believe it. That you would split the white vote.
Totally agree.
I cannot believe that when white people are 8% of the population, that you would split that vote. It's just insane.
Yep, I totally agree with you, mate.
The thing is, though,
no argument.
I mean, I think I kind of opened a can that didn't need to be opened because I've just seen this article, and it says white votes still governed by skin color in South Africa, and they're basically raging about how white people still predominantly vote for white leading politicians, even if they're not explicitly white. So even there, they're like, "Oh, white is still racist," and ultimately that happened. But before they knew what hit them, they are where they are, and that's going to happen to us, regardless of what the voting intentions of current South Africans are.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with any of this, guys. And look, there are various white groups, both Afrikaans speaking and English speaking, who are either semi-allied with or would like to be semi-allied with the Zulus, for example, because the ANC, you've got to remember, there's no such thing as a South African black person. The ANC is overwhelmingly Xhosa, yeah, overwhelmingly so. And the Zulus, for example, mostly, there are exceptions, but mostly the Zulus do not support the ANC. They support their own Inkatha Freedom Party. So the situation there is much more complicated than it looks from the outside. And then you've got to lay on top of that what happens in all countries where kids vote the same way their parents did, right? And all of this takes time to get rid of. And as I said, I'm not a Democratic supporter anyway. I never have been. So I don't know what to say about this. Like, in the first place, like I said, there's no way that 27% of white people in South Africa would vote for the ANC. I just don't believe it. I really do not believe that. I think that's a lie or a con in some way or another. But sure, there are a minority of white people who probably will, but they're the sort of white people who would probably like bend over to get, screwed up the arse by their wife's black boyfriend. There are those people, sadly. There are those people, sadly.
Let's say it's only 20%, and let's say it's true that it's 20%. That would mean that the Conservatives have better control over the white vote in the UK than a centre-left party in South Africa.
Yeah.
Because, only like 1 in 5 white people vote for the Labour Party now.
Yeah, but that's a very recent thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's only over the last 10 years that Labour, because of their absolute anti-white propaganda constantly all the time, have started losing those votes.
Yeah, but are people actually turning against them because of that?
Oh, I think that's a major reason. I mean, sure, I dare say that like Corbyn's like absolute communism, Marxism had something to do with it. But I really think like you see, this is where Sojo and I disagree. I think that the average working class person in Britain who lives next door to these guys all the time actually is more based than these middle class guys who don't live anywhere near them or only see them on the bus or the train.
See, here's an interesting thing though. I'm looking at these stats again, right? And they don't actually record ethnicity on who voted. So they do it on essentially like, what's that one here in the UK? The guy that was a former Tory. So anyway, they kind of take it as polling at the day, right? At the polling stations themselves.
Yeah.
And is it Inkatha or Inkatha?
Inkatha is the Zulu party, yeah.
Right, yeah. Because someone just brought up Wikipedia says Inkatha party is right wing. So I had a look at these stats. Yeah. And for the Inkatha party, it's 25% blacks support them and 16% whites.
In northern Natal or Natal, which is just the Zulu area, yeah, it could be true. That could,
so it must be where
but Inkatha is a regional party, you understand?
Yeah.
The Zulus are in KwaZulu Natal. That's why it's called KwaZulu Natal. And yeah, there are some of them scattered all over the place, obviously, but most of them are there. And yeah, there are loads of white people who support Inkatha because basically. The Zulu guys were never big supporters of the ANC. They don't like the ANC by and large. There are exceptions, of course, but Zuma, for example. But generally, the Zulu people don't support the ANC, and there have been like lots of actual battles with lots of people dead between the ANC and Inkatha.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because there's a lot of divides even amongst blacks in South Africa, isn't there?
Huge numbers, yes.
Yeah, and yet on all these polls, they only cite black as a single block.
Which is nonsense, because it isn't.
Right.
There's at least like 8 or 9 black major tribal peoples in South Africa.
So how many?
I mean, the Zulu and the Xhosa are the main two.
So how big as a percentage do you think the Zulus are in South Africa?
I would say after the Xhosa, they would be the second biggest black group.
So 25% of the black vote, if it's only in areas where this party's running, they must hold a pretty sizable sort of voting bloc for the limited areas that they're running in.
In KwaZulu-Natal, they do. Yeah, they'll get a lot of the vote.
Right. Okay.
I mean, probably they'll get the majority of the vote in KwaZulu-Natal. But it's only one part. It's obviously only one province of South Africa. You see, but yeah, and those guys will get white guys voting for them. Absolutely, they will. And as I said, there are both Afrikaans and English-speaking white South Africans who are quite happy to be allied with the Zulus because, to some degree, they have the same fears. Because there are traditional Zulu areas that the ANC could just take away from the chiefs and what have you who own them. You know, if you can just expropriate land from white guys, you can do it to the Zulus too. And the Zulus don't like that any more than the white guys do.
Yeah.
So there are alliances between those guys, just as there are alliances in the Western Cape between the coloured people, which is the mixed race guys, and the white guys, who are definitely they are definitely a different people. Most mixed race people in South Africa do not see themselves as black. You know how most mixed race people in the UK somehow or another transmogrify into being black when they get older. That's not the case in South Africa, and it's partly because many mixed race people in South Africa have been mixed race for several generations because they intermarry with each other, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So it's not the same as in UK, where a mixed race person in the UK will almost always, for some reason or another, end up identifying as black. In South Africa, that's not the case at all. And coloured people are not like that, by and large. They mostly don't identify as black at all. It's more complicated than like our global homo overlords would like us to believe.
You know, it's just how exhausting this is just thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Just having to navigate politics on a racial level, it's just like, oh, God, I can't be arsed with this. But this is what is basically going to come to the UK. You can already see it unfolding now.
Yep.
I just can't be arsed.
Well, it was like that woman who was shot in the head by the black guy at the drugs party in Beckham. She was on TV wearing this necklace with a great big like a cutout of Africa on the bottom of the necklace. If she really likes Africa, why the fuck doesn't she piss off back to Africa and look after Africans? What's she doing in UK?
Well, she probably doesn't even know specifically where she comes from, which is sad.
Just go back to Africa and find out, or find a place that you like there and live next to all these wonderful people.
This is the interesting thing about black people, and I don't know if I'm generalizing, but it's like you would think that they would just want separation, but they don't. It's hard to articulate, but it's almost like they desperately want to be accepted, and they want to force it. They want to force the white man to accept them and to live with them.
It's nastier than that, mate. It's nastier than that, trust me. It really is nastier than that. It's not that. What they would really like is a situation where they ran everything, but the white guys kept everything running. Because they know damn well they can't. The real truth is that, like that woman who got shot, right, and sadly is still alive. Sorry, I didn't mean that. They want the white guys to be able to be there as lower-ranking people who keep everything going. Like in South Africa, for example, you know, they're brownouts, which basically means they have power cuts all the time because the ANC is incapable of keeping the power system going. just like they're incapable of keeping the roads going or anything else, pretty much. Because black guys are just not good at that shit. And that is what these guys really want. They want the white guys there to be low-level serfs to keep everything running for them while they fuck everything else up above it. And they think somehow that will work, which of course it won't, but that's what they want.
But there is
they don't want integration. You're wrong if you think they do. They don't want integration.
No one's saying that.
Sorry, Sojo. Carry on, mate. I'm not going to say a word now. Carry on.
No, it's right. I
was interested in what you were saying. I just wanted to hear what you
fuck up.
Well, go on then. Carry on.
Sorry, I'm only kidding. But what's so strange is that basically there is no sort of unified black identity. Like black is kind of like white in the sense that it's meaningless. It's bullshit. It's not really rooted in anything. It's a construction, right? Because you're not just black, but you are. Give me a South African example.
Zulu or a Xhosa or whatever.
Yeah, you're an ethnicity. You're an ethnicity, but when it gets transplanted into the UK, suddenly some guy from the Caribbean, some guy from Namibia or Nigeria, suddenly they become black, and it's like, where the fuck is this bullshit identity come from? And it's not like come on, we all know that they're not the ones constructing their own ideology about this stuff. They're being given it like useful idiots.
Yeah.
I you know what? I don't want to have to live in a country. I really don't want to have to live in a country where it's just race 24/7. I'm actually sick and tired of it. That's actually one thing that I love about living abroad is that where I live, there's no problem like this whatsoever. There's no racial division. It's just like a normal functioning country.
But there's not many there's not many brown and black people though, is there?
That's true. There are some foreigners. There's some Filipinos who are au pairs and that kind of thing. I've seen a couple of black people. Actually, some of them have been really very nice, like very sort of nice people.
Yeah, small numbers. You can always integrate small numbers, always.
And of course, the quality control here is like off the charts. Like if you fuck around, you're out. Like you are gone. Yeah. If you're a vagrant, if you're on welfare, you're fucking gone. Your visa's revoked straight away. But it's just so nice not having to worry about this or think about it. And every time I Sky News on YouTube and look at what's going on in the UK, or I look at American news, it's just dominated by race. Everything is tinted and tinged with race.
Critical race theory.
I just, I have to say that I'm going to make the argument that basically, if you can leave these countries, do it, because you can just free yourself from this mental baggage. It's just like
not many places left to go, mate.
But I wonder about places like Brazil. So does Brazil have this problem?
Yes, they do.
No. In the sense that is race on the TV all the time? Does race permeate the narrative and colour the narrative?
Didn't they elect that right-wing guy recently to try and change things around a bit? Or semi-right-wing guy, I should say, because he's not really right-wing, but yeah.
Oh, I don't know, but what I'm saying is there like sort of like racial struggle in these countries? Is that part of the debate? Because it's basically that's not part of the debate in Singapore. I mean, Singapore is basically a good example of a multi.
Well, it's mostly Han Chinese, though, isn't it? Singapore's mostly Han Chinese.
Well, it's pretty much the same as the UK in terms of its demographic balance. 75% Han Chinese, and you've got a mixture of Tamil and Malay. So it's
even a few people who actually come from Singapore, yeah.
But it is effectively a multicultural society, and the thing that
it's almost overwhelmingly East Asian, though, isn't it?
Fucking yeah. Can I just but what I'm saying is that if you actually want to, you can have a multicultural society that is like harmonious to some degree. It's not like Singapore hasn't had its problems. It did have in its early years after its independence from Britain and its breakaway from the Malaysian Federation. But what I'm saying is that it is possible to run a country without having this dialogue basically just perpetuate itself through the culture. And in a way, in America, that was the case. And it's only really since the sort of early 2000s that this has got worse and worse. So but again, I wonder about Brazil. You know, yeah, it's a multicultural society, but does this sort of baggage of race, is it in the news all the time? I don't know. I don't think it is. I might be wrong though.
Well, all right. What I would say to that is a couple of things. First of all, to answer Patriotic Archive's question, is any black tribe unique from any other black tribe in any meaningful way? Yes, they are. The Zulu in South Africa, for example, always beat the Xhosa in war. Always did. So very different people. They have very different culture. They had a king. Their army was different. Their culture was different. Absolutely. The Zulu are as different from other black tribes in South Africa as the British are from the French or the Germans. So that's my answer to that one. Going on from that, I remember when I got married, I went to the Seychelles for my honeymoon. And the Seychelles are a very mixed race area. You're right, they're a British colony, but you will find Seychellois who are as white as I am, down to very black. There's loads of Indians, etc., etc., etc. And I was there for like 3 weeks for my honeymoon, and I thought it was great, loved it. It's a beautiful place. And one day I was in the bar, like my missus had gone to bed. I was in the bar and I was talking to these two barmaids, and I was saying to them how wonderful I thought this multicultural place was, and everyone was great. And one of these girls turned around and said to me, "Yeah, the biggest insult here is to call someone a black bastard." So, you know, not as multicultural as it appears on the surface. And she wasn't all that white, by the way, the one who told me that. And her partner behind the bar, who was very white, agreed with her. So it wasn't quite the Globo Homo wonderland that the Globo Homo people think we're going to get. We're not going to get that, unfortunately. Maybe, unfortunately.
I think I think they're stoking up this stuff. I think it's being stoked up on purpose, because I actually think that they if they wanted to, they could create a kind of civic nationalism that worked. But I actually don't think they want that. I don't think they want it. It's almost like
they don't want it, because they want us, in terms of like the white guys and the Anglo-Celtic guys, they want us gone because we're too trouble. But they want people who are.
I don't agree with that.
No, what they want is a vast mass of coffee-colored consumers. That's just my opinion, of course. It's just what I think. But I think they want a vast mass of lower IQ coffee-colored consumers, because that will suit them, who are going to turn into 21st century serfs to this like overarching elite, who are going to make like the aristocracy of the Middle Ages look like nothing. That's what I really think these guys are aiming for eventually. And it's not just in Europe and Britain. I think that's like all over the world. That's what they want. I think that's the real like end goal of this Great Reset nonsense.
It just doesn't make any sense to me why you would want to make a weak, thick, stupid nation like that.
No, weak, thick, stupid world, not just nation.
You might as well just exterminate people.
Well, maybe they'll do that eventually, but I think they just want us to be like these ants and cow. That's what I think. And I think that goes equally for. They're using black people at the moment as useful idiots. Yeah, they're just using them as useful idiots. But I think their ultimate goal is the like everyone is going to be just these really low-level consumers who won't own anything, who will live in these little tiny units, who will eat these bugs rather than real meat, who won't be allowed to leave their cities. I think we're heading for like a real dystopia that will make 1984 look not so bad. I think we're heading for something really, really vile. I mean, Adam, what do you think about that stuff, man?
I don't know. I think it can generally be just leveled up to the fact that you've got all these different people working towards their own goals within a system that's largely that's become largely dysgenic in structure.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like it's an overwhelming. There's not a Mr. Big and like his lieutenants. That's not what I'm saying. I just think that like that's the way the world is going with this corporate global homo. I think there's going to be a very
Isaiah Sheckelstein pulling all the strings.
No, I actually don't. No, I mean some of those elites are Jewish for sure. Some of those elites are, but many of them are not.
Many of them are just lefty white Anglos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and they're not even, and they're not even all Anglos. There's plenty of people like Macron in France and Angela Merkel in Germany. I mean, don't forget those guys. Because they're all going the same way. And like there are like and that guy from the World Economic Forum, what's his name? Klaus, whatever his name is, the German dude who wears the James Bond villain outfits. These people are all heading in the same direction, and what it is we're all going to end up like herds of cow or ants underneath them. And I really think that's what's going on more than anything else.
But I mean, I think it's also quite. I mean, because a lot of the stuff that they get in that World Economic Forum, a lot of their ideas came from this economist from Florida. I forget his name. He coined a lot of this stuff first, and I remember watching his TED talk, and he's sitting there talking away, and he takes questions at the end, and someone says, "Oh, I'm from Portland, and I'd like to see a lot of this stuff there." This was quite a few years ago. And he goes, "Oh, Portland is actually the city that I modelled most of my ideas off of." And now, of course, Portland's got like a 400% elevated homicide rate over the last year, and they've had like 200 days of rioting out of the last 400 or something ridiculous.
Who wouldn't want to live there? No,
people do though, and it's a largely white city. That's the thing, though.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. Look, I am kind of in between most people on what I think is happening. I am not one of these guys who thinks like no black person or mixed race person should live in England. I'm not one of those guys at all. But I think it should be overwhelmingly Anglo-Celtic because that's what it should be. And I absolutely think that Zululand should be overwhelmingly full of Zulus. And I absolutely think that France should be full of actual French people. But like I said, I'm in the middle of a lot of this stuff, you know? And I'm not one of these people who adopts the slave mentality that, like, you know, we're all run by this little Jewish elite and us poor guys ain't got no chance, you know? I'm not one of those guys either. Like, are there bad Jewish elites? Yeah, of course there are. But there's, as you said yourself, Armand, there are loads of bad Anglo elites too. Elites in inverted commas, of course. Elites in inverted commas, of course. So, you know, I have a great sympathy with what Sojo said, aka Harold Chipman, that you know, move. Well, yeah, that's kind of what Peter Hitchens says, for example. But like, there's less and less places you can move to.
Yeah, but Peter Hitchens says, "Oh, move to Sweden." It's like, No, that's not really in the spirit of the idea, mate. Sweden, no.
Yeah,
I can't stand Hitchens.
Mate, I put a video up on the Discord called "Sweden is Hell on Earth," which you can find on YouTube if anyone in the audience here wants to go and watch it.
Yeah, I watched that. It's kind of funny. Actually.
Yeah, Sweden is Hell on Earth is a very good video. Go and look it up. It's good. It's from I Hypocrite channel, I believe. Well worth watching. Well worth watching. And really, if he's accurate, Sweden indeed is hell on earth. But yeah, I don't know, guys. I don't think we're really disagreeing here. Has Limbo gone off to sharpen his cookery? Could well be. Could well be.
He did say in a private chat that he had to go.
Yeah, that's cool. That's all right. I'm happy to have Limbo on because he's a young chap. He's the son of a Gurkha soldier, and I think like Gurkha soldiers are one group who I'm very happy if they've done 9 years in the army, not got in trouble. Yeah, I've got no problem with those guys living in England. None at all. They're probably better than some native Brits.
Yeah, but the thing is, you pick and choose your position. So it's like, oh, I want the UK to stay.
I'm an Anglo exceptionalist, but I'm also a Gurkha exceptionalist. How is that picking and choosing my position?
Well, because on one hand you'll say, well, I want to keep the UK majority Anglo-Celtic, but at the same time, the Gurkhas are okay because they've served in the army, and it's like you start carving out these exceptions.
No, that's the only exception I make. It's the only one I make, and like there are, let's say, and I'm exaggerating now because of all the cuts in the British Army. Let's say there are 5 battalions of Gurkhas, which is like 2,500 blokes. Like you might get 100 guys a year, maybe, who were eligible, and you might get a quarter of that number who would take it up because the Gurkha pension's worth a lot more in Nepal than it is in UK. So, and the Gurkhas are the only people I say that about. So I don't think you're right there, Sojo.
Yeah, but then actually really what you want is like a 99.99% Anglo-Celtic nation.
Ideally, listen, there's two differences or 2 points here. One is ideally, that would be great, but we're not going to get that, so no. But I'd like it to be 90% British. I really would. 90% British. I think we could live with 90% British, like Anglo-Celtic British. I mean, we could probably just about live with 85% Anglo-Celtic British, but not much lower than that. Like, if you're going to really push me in that direction, that's probably what I'd say. Because, like, I'm not in favor of forcing people out, certainly not at the moment, anyway. I absolutely agree with the idea of giving people, I'd give people 25,000 quid to piss off. Yes, I would. If they want to take it voluntarily, and on the condition they didn't come back, of course, I'd do that too. But I'm not in favor of absolutely making people leave. But I think all mass immigration, whether it be from the third world or from Europe, needs to stop. That's my main position. And then, to some degree, it would be up to the British people themselves to get their reproduction rates up enough that, like, the country could stabilize.
I mean, that's the easiest thing in the world. My informant, Deep Throat, who I managed to get to read Douglas Murray's Strange Death of Europe after much nagging, but he has now read it. He said, but we've heard all these arguments before. It was always, what's another 2%? And it just keeps going and going and going.
Yeah, but that's not my argument. I don't say that, you see.
Well,
when do I say what? No, no, I'm not. I'm saying that like Gurkha Rifles, who've done 9 years service with no problems in the British Army, should be allowed to settle there. That's the only people I would say that about. Nobody else. Literally nobody else.
What? Even your black mate in the army?
My black mate in the army was already here. What, I don't understand what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize he was already here. Okay.
Well, he didn't join the British Army from overseas. Like I think his father was born in Britain.
Well, no, that guy, Captain Bihari. He was from Grenada, wasn't he? So you can join the British Armed Forces from the Commonwealth.
You can. The British Army is so struggling for recruits. They've increased that recently. Yeah, but you're talking about such a tiny number of people. Like there's a few people from Fiji join the British Armed Forces and have done since the 1960s. But like you're talking about, like I doubt if it's 1,000 since the 1960s. So you're talking about such a small number. It really makes no odds.
I tell you what, if we had the same number of Fiji immigrants as we do Pakistani immigrants, we would not be having the problems that we currently have. I mean, the Fijians seem quite a sort of like honor-based, sort of like paganistic culture that is actually kind of quite based. I think we would have done a lot better if we had a whole bunch of Fijians rather than fucking Pakistanis.
Yeah, I got no problem with that. But and also the Fijians join the British Army, the Pakistanis don't. I mean, one of the things that the Globo Homo propaganda tries to put across is that the Pakistanis, etc., join the British Army. You know that infamous ad where the whole patrol supposedly stopped for this wanker Pakistani to pray to his pedophile
what?
blokes.
I've not. Can you fill me in? I've not heard this.
Oh, there was an infamous British Army ad where the British Army patrol was going along, and this Pakistani guy decided he wanted to pray, to what's his name, blessings and peace be upon him, etc., and all that bollocks. And the whole patrol just stops while he does this because the enemy won't kill you while he's doing that.
Right, lads. Yeah, before we blow this Taliban's man's head off, we're going to let Ahmed pray to Allah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But having said that, that was an infamous. It was a real British Army ad, which maybe Adam and you might have even seen it.
Yeah. I remember speaking to someone I was working with at the time, and I said to him, I was saying to him how nonsense it was, and he was going, and I said, well, it's not aimed at the people that actually join the army, which is like white working class lads.
No.
And he was going, yeah, but the Muslims would join if the advertisements were focused on that. But they're underrepresented, and that's why they don't join. It's like, well, I think the fact we're bombing their brothers and sisters in the Middle East has probably got more to do with that.
Yeah. No, but honestly, that was a real British Army ad, and the fact of the matter is that 3 times as many British Muslims joined the Islamic State terrorists as have ever joined the British Army. It's just nonsense. It's just as Ahmed was saying, it's just
born and bred, mate. Born and bred. They built this country up. I mean, why not? I mean, I'd fucking join ISIS. Come on now.
Yeah, absolutely. But then of course, when
best of luck to my Muslim brothers, my fellow Britons. I mean, the best of luck to you. They're fighting a good fight, inshallah.
Yeah, and of course, when ISIS gets beat and these guys get captured, they then all beg to be allowed to come back to Britain for.
Shamima Begum was just a child. She should definitely come back. I mean, after all, she's just as British as you or I.
She's about as British as I am Zulu, but yeah, all right.
I can imagine marrying her in a high church Anglican cathedral. Actually, it would be quite the representation of modern Britain. A union between brown and white under the cloth of the liberal church. Ah, wonderful.
But you'd never be quite sure if she didn't behead your white baby at some stage when you were at work. It's just, for God's sake, man.
She talked me into bed with the tequila.
Yeah. It's just a joke, man. But it's kind of like what we were talking about. Like
it's like a parody, though.
It is Clown World. It
is Clown World. It's like a parody. It's like, who takes this seriously? But there are people that, I don't know, it's like with this Sasha Johnson who got shot. So when it first kicked off, and you get Diane Abbott saying, "Oh, this is terrible. This
racism."
Racism, and then it comes out that it's Cameron DeRiggs or whatever his name is, and it's like this silence sort of descends over Twitter, and I think you get this impression where, like, what's the Cohen song? Everybody knows. It's like it's a complete fucking fraud. Everybody bloody knows,
but no one will say a word.
No one will say a word, and it's just living in this kind of surreal Dali-like painting of life where nothing makes any sense, and it's just one big farce. It's just it's infuriating.
That's what gets me angry, man. That's what gets me angry. And what happens, you see, in the UK, and this is why I have a little more sympathy for the working class than you sometimes do, or seem to, is that, like, the guys who really see this happening on the street are the working class guys. And I do honestly think that has been part of the destruction of the Labour vote in the North. That they see this happening, but because they're working class and they can't necessarily express themselves in the correct manner, and also because, of course, it's not politically correct. They're just like they're ridiculed and made to look idiots by our Marxist guys who run the mainstream media that we were talking about earlier.
A large part of this thing about how Labour just controls the North was a bit of a myth. Like terms like the Red Wall really only came about at the last election. Like the North flips just the same as anywhere else. It was a bit more red in certain areas.
It hadn't flipped for a long time, though, Am I not right? Didn't Labour lose seats in the last election that they hadn't lost since the 1920s?
I'm sure there'd be a few, but it'd be the same if it flipped in the South. But a lot of those seats do still move around.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen. The thing is that, like, lots of Northern guys were extremely patriotic, but, like, because their dad and their granddad and their great granddad did, they used to vote Labour. And Labour were just so obviously bad in recent years that they've stopped. And the trouble from our point of view, like as nationalists and patriots, is that instead of switching beyond the Conservatives, they've just gone to the Conservatives, which doesn't do us a lot of good because, like, the modern, in inverted commas, Conservative Party isn't conserving anything. It's like the differences between Tony Blair's New Labour and Alexander Johnson's current Conservative Party are infinitesimal, really, for the most part.
Yes, but they're not voting on. I mean, it really is just a question of, if you think about the average person, the metric that they use when they go to vote is, what out of these two options that I have, which is the least worst. That's essentially the choice that they're given.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think Labour will actually dial things back, and I think we're already seeing that. And they're just going to figure out I think it's kind of like the woke thing that's kind of really pushed people into the arms of the Tories. So all they have to do is dial that back. It's literally just a question.
I don't think they can. I see. This is where
of course they can.
No,
of course they can. They can absolutely. They just need another Blair. They can have another Blair. Blair could even come back probably, or you get another Blair type, a Blairite. All you have to do is dial the rhetoric back and then just implement when you actually get
Yeah,
into power
yeah,
all the
I see
things
what
you
you're
want to
saying,
do anyway. Labour have learned this lesson. They've already gone through this playbook. It works. The third way, it's essentially, it's just talk like the Tories do, but implement all the stuff that you want. That's all they have to do.
Rub the British people's noses in diversity, as one of Blair's senior people said during the Tony Blair government.
But
this
is
is exactly
how,
what Blair
in
did.
secret.
Yeah, I mean, Blair literally said he was going to be firm but fair on immigration. As one example, that's what he said on the manifesto. That's what he said.
And he made the Conservatives look like they actually were conservative in terms of immigration. He just opened the floodgates as wide as he possibly could.
Do you know that under John Major, net immigration went into minus figures?
Yeah, for a little while. Yeah, I do.
It's just because a lot of people always try to say that Margaret Thatcher was not was just one of them, and I think in a lot of ways she was, but she did dial back immigration kind of immensely.
She did. Yeah, she did. And the tragedy of Margaret Thatcher was, to my mind, that she was just working out very, very late in the day, it has to be said, the real nature of the European Union when Major stabbed her in the back because she was working that out and signed the Maastricht Agreement. Because that immigration that went into the black under Major was because of Thatcher, not because of Major.
It's interesting that you pick that out as being her sort of weak point, because I actually see her tenure and that of Ronald Reagan. This is really the revolution of quote unquote free market economics and deregulation. And this is really where conservatism essentially pivoted to, we don't talk about social issues anymore. We're going to ditch all of that and we're just going to talk about economics. Her and Reagan really set up the sort of the long-term narrative and framework where conservatism. If I may finish, that they set up this this infrastructure where conservative dialogue is really constrained within this sort of false paradigm. I think that's one of the bad legacies of Thatcher, in my view. It's very hard for us to get out of that.
I would say that Ronald Reagan was a lot worse on that than Thatcher was.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say, is that Reagan was far worse than Thatcher.
Because at least Thatcher did bring in like Section 28, and she was still at least to talk about this stuff to some degree. But then again, maybe that's also what cost her. So.
Yeah, I think like people tend to associate this stuff. And Thatcher was like better than Reagan. I'm not a big fan of Reagan. The one main thing that Thatcher and Reagan agreed on was that if America and Britain spent enough money, they could bankrupt the Soviet Union, and they did. So yeah, okay, but I think Thatcher was a bit more based on that. But she had her problems. Like I said, she took a very long time to work out the real nature of the European Union for an intelligent woman, and she was.
Well, I mean, you got to kind of wonder if she knew all along, but she kind of went along with it anyway. I mean, she did sign the Lancaster House Agreement.
Yeah, again, another absolute evil that she did, like the Lancaster House Agreement, which destroyed Rhodesia. Yeah, totally agree with that. Totally agree, Armand. You're right.
As you brought up on screen, Simple Pirate says, "What do you guys think about Enoch Powell?"
Yeah, I just put that on the screen because I like Enoch Powell. He was the youngest brigadier general of the British Army in World War II. In his 20s, he was teaching classical Greek in an Australian school. And he was just a really, really, really intelligent, good, and patriotic British bloke. I've got nothing bad to say about Enoch Powell at all.
Probably hugely autistic. He didn't like having water poured on him, so he wouldn't shower. He'd use a bath instead.
Well, that's British, I suppose.
Yeah, he had some funny views on Christianity, like he had some because he was like quite a strong Christian in his youth, and then he became an atheist after he read The Golden Bough, and then he sort of came back to Christianity later, but he was kind of people would say to him, "Are you a Christian?" And he would say, "I'm an Anglican." He was a bit funny about it. I kind of liked it though.
I can understand
Yeah.
that. That's the essentially the Scruton position, right? Which is
Yeah.
or who's the French guy who Bowden references? He said Charles Marois. I don't know if I'm butchering the pronunciation, but essentially this guy was essentially an atheist, but he set up like a fundamentalist Catholic like splinter group or something, and basically because it's belief is foundational for most people and necessary for a society. So I look at Powell's statement when he says, "Oh, I'm an Anglican," and I see the same thing, the echoes of the same thing there. That's kind of my view as well, in the sense that I don't believe in Christ, but I would participate in all Anglican ceremonies and gladly go. And probably even get married there, despite the fact that I'm quite literally don't believe in Christ, but I would do that because I view it as being like my church because it's part of tradition, and I think that seems to be the way that Powell viewed it as well.
I think Powell actually described it as a worthy inheritance for an Englishman, or something along those lines.
Yeah, High Anglican is like, I like the traditions of it. I got married in a High Anglican church. My son was baptized in a High Anglican church. And the vicar who did both of those things was an ex-RAF bloke. So, who flew Shackletons in the 1950s.
Yeah. So yeah, and he was an interesting man all round, to be honest, Powell. He had lots of really nuanced takes on a lot of different stuff. Someone else mentioned it, actually. I think it was on that Powell's in Stream, the Simon Heffer book, Like the Roman. It's a monster of a book. It's absolutely enormous, but it is very good.
Yeah, listen, I got nothing bad to say about Powell. I mean, look at the Conservative Party. What happened with Powell? When Powell did his Rivers of Blood speech, which the overwhelming majority of the British working class supported, like enormously so, like Labour guys,
everyone, not just working class.
Middle class, upper class people, even everyone supported him. And had he become a Conservative Prime Minister, the Conservatives would have walked that next election. And instead, what did the Conservatives do? Well, they put in charge of Britain Ted Heath, who was a pedophile, and provably so, a pedophile, who used to take little tiny boys on his boats and do unspeakable things to them. That's who took us into the then EEC. That was the guy who the Conservatives chose to put in charge of them, rather than Enoch Powell, who, to my mind, is like a great British and English man.
Yeah, they tried to claim that letter he wrote was fake, that he read out was fake as well in that speech. But they did track down later the person who would have wrote it, who'd passed away by that point. And the story's pretty grim, actually, that she was like the last of two white families on this street, and sort of essentially lived in the room at the back of her house. It was in a video I did, actually.
Yeah, I know the one you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got nothing bad to say about Powell at all. Ted Heath, on the other hand, I hope he burns in hell forever.
Yeah, he is. But yeah, they tried to do a bit of whataboutism on that as well, and tried to deflect some paedophilia accusations towards Enoch Powell after his death. I think it was after his death.
How long was he married, for fuck's sake? Never the slightest whiff of anything bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, most of the people that knew him said that like he wasn't in the places where they said he was, and it was all just a load of rubbish, basically. And so yeah.
I mean, an actual paedophile like Ted Heath, who was an actual paedophile, there are British cops who have turned around and said, were he alive, he would have been convicted.
Yeah.
Like there's that much evidence against him, and imagine how much evidence is covered up because he was prime minister. And Enoch Powell, who, as far as I know, never did anything bad in his entire life. All he ever did was fight for Britain and go and teach kids in the Old Commonwealth, and then tell Britain what was going to happen to it, and he was exactly right. Patriotic Archive, Bernard Montgomery was never a suspected pedo, ever. I mean, there are things I don't like about Monty, but he was never ever a suspected pedo. He didn't like Eisenhower much, but then I don't like Eisenhower much either. But there we go. So there you go.
So we're going to call it there? You said 2.5 hours. Or did you want to go a bit longer?
Yeah, we'll go on a little bit longer just because I don't want to leave on such a downer. I mean, why Patriotic Archive? Where did you ever find that Bernard Montgomery had anything about him that was a pedo? Really? Where did that come from? Because it's nonsense.
I thought you didn't want to leave the stream on a down note.
Well, no, I don't. I'd like to destroy this nonsense because it's not true. You know, Bernard Montgomery was like a happily married man, for God's sake. And I don't think he was a particularly sexual man, but he certainly wasn't a bloody pedo. Now he didn't like Eisenhower, but I don't like Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the US president in 1956 when Suez happened. So I'm no Eisenhower fan, trust me. But then I'm a British patriot, not an American patriot, you see. Honestly, I just don't understand where this shit comes from. Like, they tried to do this, the same thing they tried to do to bloody the British commander in Burma, who eventually became governor of Australia. They tried to turn around and say there were pedophile allegations against him. Nothing was ever even slightly proved. And they recently did the same thing with what's his name? The Australian cardinal in the Roman Catholic Church. Hardly any evidence. Nah, he was a really bad guy. It's what happens all the time with this Me Too stuff. You know, if 3 women from 20 years ago turned around and said, "Oh, he touched me on my vagina," or "he put his hand on my breast," all of a sudden you get sacked from your job. Even though it was 20 years ago, and at the time they never said a word to anyone. It's utter bollocks, and we have to stop believing it. You know, Me Too is bollocks. It really is.
I'm a little bit skeptical that, you know, huge amounts of normal average people are getting caught by this stuff, because there are things like libel, tortious interference, that, you know, you can't just go around like accusing people of stuff willy-nilly, and you can't go around sacking people for stuff willy-nilly either. So I'm a little bit skeptical that this is an endemic problem.
All right. Like I said earlier, when we started, Sojo, there's a British producer of TV, I think, who BBC used the words in inverted commas. Several women claimed historical sexual malfeasance or whatever it might have been, and he's been sacked from his job.
There's no way.
Trial, no nothing.
Bullshit. There's no way a high-profile appointee at the BBC gets sacked without there being an investigation or anything like that.
All right.
That would.
Do you want me to show you the actual article?
Yes, please. Let's have a look. Yeah.
All right, go on then. Let me find it. God, no, they're going on about fucking cuck Boris marrying his ugly woman. I tell you what, if I was Boris Johnson, I'd get a prettier girl than that. If I was the Prime Minister of Britain, I would most definitely get a prettier girl than that. Gotta say. Yeah, maybe they've ditched this article. Looks like maybe they have. That's weird. Oh, here we go. After award-winning producer Charlie Hansen has been removed from Netflix production Afterlife and suspended from BAFTA following accusations of women of historical sexual misconduct. Netflix and BAFTA took action after being contacted by the women this week. Ricky Gervais, the Afterlife creator and actor, said he was shocked and appalled by these accusations. Mr. Hansen said, based on summaries provided to me, the accusations were demonstrably false.
What was the guy's job?
He is an award-winning producer, and he
producer.
was.
So he's actually producers finance films. So he's probably not an employee.
Removed from Netflix production Afterlife and suspended from BAFTA, which is a British organisation, as you probably know.
Interesting.
And he's a mate of Ricky Gervais, who of course was recently fairly well known for slagging off Hollywood on that.
He could be a contractor rather than an employee. I mean, you don't know how these things are structured. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if these large multinationals had clauses that said if there's any with impropriety.
Yeah, I don't disagree, mate. Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Well, so in these circumstances, yeah, that obviously has happened. But like the average guy who's actually an employee at the BBC, you can't just sack people like that without there being any recourse. So that's why I think sometimes it's overdone a bit.
I don't disagree with you at all. But what I would say to you, Sojo, is that like if you're a bloke, yeah, and if you go out at night and you go to, let's say, a pub or a nightclub or whatever it might be, and having had a few drinks, you meet a girl who's also had a few drinks, and you go back to her place, and you do the stuff, you know, that one does when you're doing that stuff. If on the following day, or the following week, or the following month, or a year later, she tries to turn around and say that you raped her, yeah? And if she can say she was drunk, doesn't matter if you were, makes no difference whatever, if you were drunk or even more drunk than she was, if she turns around and says that she was drunk and you had sex with her, it doesn't matter if it was a day later, a week later, a month later, or a year later, you are still going to be in trouble as a man. And that is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
Well, that's not actually true in a sense that, first of all, you know, there's a question whether the Crown Prosecution Service actually think they have a case. So if a woman, I'm talking about like, you know, an average man and a woman 18 months later says, oh, I was raped by this guy. I mean, what's the Crown Prosecution Service actually got to go on in those circumstances? Like very little, no evidence of physical violence. Both parties' stories are going to be hazy as fuck, given the duration of time. So in most, and then of course, for a woman to actually go to the effort to lie about something and go through all the fucking hassle and rigmarole,
which they do all the time. There's like loads of evidence.
Do they?
Women do. Yes, they do.
Women the time?
Do that a lot. Yeah, it's quite common.
They do that a lot, do they? They go through I mean,
it's quite common.
It seems crazy to me that they would actually.
Well, women are fairly crazy. That's one of the things you have to work out.
Yeah, but what we're talking about, to accuse somebody of rape and to try and take them to court over something that didn't happen is pretty.
But they don't always
psychotic.
Yeah, but they don't always take you to court, Sojo. What they often do is just publicise it, which has almost the same effects. these days.
Yeah, but that's like fucking libeling someone.
Yeah, and
What is fuck? You can take them to civil court, sue them.
if you've got enough money, you can. Yes, you might be able to. I don't think I could. I mean, not that I have much to do with women these days, but if I did, I don't think I could. You might be able to do that, but I don't think I could. Whether the average guy working in an average job could, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm in my late 30s. I've never seen a woman accuse a man of rape in public on Facebook. I mean, I don't use Facebook. I can't think of a single instance where that's actually happened.
All right. Well,
So-
it has happened. Yeah, but it has happened.
Well, of course it's happened, but I don't think it's endemic. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it is.
I don't know, man. I honestly, I just think we're in this ridiculous situation now. And I think this is one of the reasons why fewer and fewer men are actually dating, is that, like, you're not safe. You're just not safe.
No, I think it's the bar that men have to meet these days is fucking impossible.
Yeah.
That's probably the problem. I mean, guys are desperate to meet women. You know, I think they'll risk the rape claim to get a bit of poontang. then go without, you know.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I just think, and I think it's being done deliberately. I mean, you know, it's if you can alienate men and women, which is certainly what our global homo overlords want to do to a large degree.
Do they?
I really think they do.
Agree with.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, if you look at the way everything is organized today, and listen, I'm going to be honest here. I do come from a bit of a MGTOW background. I'm not a total MGTOW person by any means, but I do come from a bit of that background. But if you look at every single thing that feminism, and remember, feminism is basically just an offshoot of leftism and socialism. It's the same difference. You can't be a right-wing feminist, no matter what the few supposed right-wing feminists try to claim. You can't be a right-wing feminist. Feminism is a left-wing thing. It absolutely is. If you look at that stuff, again, it's designed to do what it does. You know, it's the same as, like, a woman can go on social media these days and laugh about killing a baby, and they do frequently. There was a thing on YouTube just a couple of days ago about a woman who did that. A woman who I wouldn't have slept with I wouldn't sleep with now, never mind when I was 25, because she was.
It's the woman with, like, the champagne at the end of it or something like that.
Yeah, the fat blonde bitch. Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and like, this is all right. You can absolutely celebrate being a demon. Oh, I'm killing my baby. I'm so cool. and that's all right. It's like, I mean, I'm not saying that women should never have an abortion, because I'm not totally anti-abortion. But the idea that a woman should celebrate it and think it's funny is pathetic.
Well, first of all, it was in bad taste, but it was also like a TikTok video, and it's meant to be. I looked in and thought, well, this is like a shit women joke. Like, you know, women aren't funny. It was meant to be funny. It was obviously meant to be funny, but it wasn't funny. But
women are supposed to care about that shit. You understand?
But again, you're talking about one. Yeah, but you're taking one video and assuming that it's, like, representative of, you know, a vast swathe of the public, and, you know, I don't think that's really the case.
I don't know. There's so many women have abortions. Most of them can't give a shit, really. I mean, come on. We're talking about millions these days.
Yeah, but
there used to be a time that a woman having an abortion was like a big emotional event. It ain't anymore. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Well, do we know that, though? I mean, I actually can't think of. I actually don't know any women. I don't know any women who have admitted that they had an abortion. To me,
well, I know two that told me they did. But there we go.
Well, and how did it affect them?
Not at all.
And what was the circumstances? Was it early? Was it the morning after pill? What was this, or was it fully?
No, I mean
Barton?
abortions, like weeks and months into the thing.
Yeah, well, that is. I mean, that I find
didn't affect them at all, man. Didn't affect them at all. And they both did far worse. And they both did far worse things than that, to be honest. But but this is
that's mental, as PA says, or Patriotic Archive says that is mental.
This is modern Western women, mate. Trust me, it is. And they weren't exceptional. They were not exceptional. They were pretty average chicks. I mean, maybe a bit more better looking than some, but average chicks. And this is the problem we're in. And again, I say it's.
Oh yeah, sorry. You were saying the fault of feminism, but again, I also think that it's also modernity in the sense that, well,
how much of modernity is feminism?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that, well, there's two elements to this, right? Modernity in the sense that social media, internet dating, the kind of like MGTOW takes about modernity, and then there's also the feminist aspect in the sense that, well, women now have access to resources, they don't necessarily need
from the government mostly, but yeah.
Well, no, not mostly from the government. If you're a single woman in your 20s and you're working a corporate job, you're not on welfare. You're not on welfare. It's just that simple. You're not on welfare.
But the vast majority of money that women get is either from the government or from men.
Well, again,
money they get from the government is mostly from men. Look at the tax. Look at where tax comes from, Soja. It ain't from women.
Yeah, but again, this is like legacy, like OAPs and like mothers who are sort of third wave feminism.
Oh, okay. So you think this is all going to change in the next 20 years in the wonderful coffee-colored world we're heading into?
No. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying. I'm getting back to the original point. Is that there's the two aspects, which is that women are in the workplace, which is not really an effect of modernity, but one of feminism, I guess. Well, I suppose it is also modernity in the sense that it's in big businesses' interest for women to be working. That's not so it dovetails with feminism, right? It dovetails with feminism. And then there's the purely technological aspect where, they can get access to a huge pool of men that wouldn't have been possible in the past through dating apps. Which makes it very hard for the average guy, seemingly, if you believe what the MGTOW guys are saying. So it's like like a pincer movement. There's two things at play here.
Yeah, okay. Adam, what do you think about this for a minute, mate? Just before I go to Lou, please.
I don't really do MGTOW stuff, to be honest. I don't really know what to think about it.
But you presumably have a thought on. Presumably, you can have a thought on what we were just talking about that's unrelated to MGTOW.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I said a couple of streams ago that there's there was these women at work and they were talking about they were making sort of fairly feminist points. But they're not actually feminists, or they don't identify as such, and very few people do, and yet it's almost become synonymous with the culture anyway, or not synonymous. That's not the right word I'm thinking of. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah, it's almost like received canon now,
in
a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, someone said Islam is the answer to the women question. White Sharia, brother. No, the thing is that
Inshallah.
I don't think it was ever really true that Islam was right about women. I think it was always true that Christianity was right about sex, but you can't really put that genie back in the bottle anymore.
No.
Sorry, what did I miss, guys?
Not much.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. Your takes are usually interesting, but what I would say is, like, just Tommy Hill here in the chat. This is one of our problems as people on the right. Like, if I'm not mistaken, you were one of the guys who said to me on the last Splendid Isolation stream that British nationalism is cringe because we have to be English nationalists, not British nationalists, and I didn't agree.
Who said that?
Like, I think Tommy Hill did, but it might have been somebody else. If it wasn't
okay.
you, if it was like in comments under the stream, and if it wasn't Tommy Hill, please forgive me. But somebody did, and I just think this is one of the problems we face as right-wing people, is that we are so fucking divided on all these various issues. Like, because look, I think getting a woman as a young man is a good idea. You should. As a young man, you need to have girlfriends and then eventually find yourself a decent wife. But my idea is not trying to get any woman. You need to try and get a good woman. And yeah, that's hard, mate. It is. Thank you, Tommy Hill. It was you, I thought so. But yeah, you do have to try and get a woman as a bloke, because, eventually you want to become a father and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things we on the right have to try and preserve is families, for God's sake. Families with mothers and fathers. But yeah, we all have these little differences. I mean, even between the three of us on this stream, like, we have our differences. I think we broadly agree, apart from when Sojo decides he wants to go total black pill. But I think we broadly agree on stuff. But like, we certainly have our disagreements. And the bigger tent you try and make the right, which we have to if we're going to get anywhere, the more those disagreements come in. And I don't know, somehow or another, we have to find a way that we concentrate on the things we agree on and leave the things we don't agree on until later on, when maybe we've got a bit forward. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I would take the Cromwell approach. I would collaborate with you. You're the equivalent of a lever or a ranter to me. And once we'd disposed of the king, then I'd get rid of you.
Yeah. Whereas
then I'd go on to conquer Ireland.
Yeah, I'd go and conquer Ireland for sure, but I would do it the other way around. I'd wait until the king came back in peace again, and then I'd get rid of you. But
yeah.
Actually, I wouldn't get rid of you, Sojo. I kind of like it, mate. I'd probably make you a lieutenant in the West India Regiment or something, where if you survive the field, you might get off.
And you far away. Well, you wouldn't send me to Coventry then, okay?
No, I wouldn't send you to Coventry, mate. No, I actually like you, mate. You will find I have you on every stream that you want to come on, because I do like it. But and also I think sometimes you protest too much. I think sometimes.
I have to say that I've noticed this. Recur when. Here's how things work. When Duke doesn't like my opinion, what he says is that I'm just kicking up a fuss. That's your get out clause. Oh, Sojo really does believe this stuff. He's just saying these other things to be sort of, a dissension or whatever. And it's like, no, I really do believe these things. You just don't like it.
and sometimes I still think that, the basic 37 stuff you still believed in. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, that goes without saying, really. Doesn't need to, I don't think that needs to be sort of reiterated.
Well, there you
but
go.
A lot of it is meme-like. It's not palatable to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. But I got attracted to the 37 because I really believe in what the 37 originally said. Not some of the later aspects of it where they did episode 25 of looking at some idiot's book. But
yeah, I think your historiography of these events are way out of order. They're not they're not right. The video that you're thinking of actually came later. It's actually the movement began from much more crass origins than you I think than you're prepared to admit.
Well, that's probably true. That's probably true. I mean, I wasn't in the face-7 to start with. I mean, I got to it via Brutus and what have you, and that excellent video, which apparently is no longer available, sadly. The original 37 thing is pretty much what I've believed all my life, you know, to be honest, crass as it may seem. The British were the chosen guys and all the rest of it. Yeah, I'll agree with all that. That's kind of where I've always been since I was a kid. It's kind of what my dad believed, my granddad believed, my great-granddad believed. You know, they were all cannon fodder soldiers. That's just what we always believed. And as far as I was aware, like talking to people when I was growing up, and including my dad's mates and all the rest of it, that's what everyone believed. That was what British people used to believe it or not. It is. You know, we used to have Empire Day, for God's sake, whichever was a big celebration that everyone liked. I don't say we can go back to that, but we have to get some kind of grasp on our past and how great it was in order to realize who we are. And if we don't do that, we're going to lose. That's my real thing. It really is. If people are separated from their past, they're going to lose. And that's exactly why our Globo Homo overlords of various descriptions from Boris Johnson downwards are trying to do that.
But that's already happened, though. I think that's where we disagree.
Yeah, it's not fully happened. It's happening.
I think it has. My parents appear to be the Tony Blair generation. He was born in the 50s, like mid 50s, kind of where my parents are. Basically, my mum, both my parents have trivial views and outlooks on life. So like my dad will say, oh, when I die, just put me in a cardboard box. And it's like, nothing is serious. There's no seriousness in anything he says. Everything's like one big joke. And I just view that generation, and it's funny in a way, that post-war generation, it's such a pathetic generation. Like what their parents had been through, and they seem to care about nothing. My dad says things like, oh, well, I'll be dead by the time that happens. It's like he just doesn't care. All he wants to do is go fishing, like quite literally, like, well, all I want to do is go fishing. And
fishing's traditional.
Yeah, but I mean, whatever. But to think that, oh, the only thing that I care about is going fishing and everything else is kind of like, fuck it. That is, I think it's just a trivial view of life that you don't value anything. And it gets like with my mother, she'll say things like, I remember when I came back to England last December after the lockdown, and I got back and I got on Amazon and I ordered some books, and I ordered Our Church by Roger Scruton. And she came over to my apartment, my flat, and we were talking. She said, oh, you bought some books? I said, yeah. So what have you got? I said, I've got Our Church by Roger Scruton. So I want to learn about the Anglican Church. I want to learn about its history. And she physically turned her nose up and said, oh, like she had this like revulsion to sort of like religion. She said, religion's just the cause of all wars. And I thought, it's just like such a normie take. First of all, it's not even fucking true. But even just to have that attitude of like, oh, I don't want to learn about a part of our heritage. It's just a generation that just doesn't give a fuck. So when you say that, like, oh, I don't think that process has fully been sort of like gone through, like worked its way through the system, I look at my parents and think to myself, they're like a shadow of their parents. Like when my gran was alive, I used to talk to her. We used to talk about the war. She was born in 1929. I used to ask her things about the war. I used to ask her about my grandfather, my great-grandfather, like what they were doing in the war. And like I used to ask about the ancestry of the family, and we'd go through the photos and go through the family tree and everything like that. My mum and dad don't give a shit about any of that, couldn't care less. Like, all my dad tell us, "Do you see Top Gear?" No, I didn't see Top Gear. I don't own a TV. Like, I don't know how many times I've told you this, but I don't own a TV. I've not owned a TV for 7 years. I don't know why you ask me these things. That's what they're like. They just don't care.
Yeah.
Sorry for that rant about my parents, but like,
No, it's cool, man. That's cool.
They seem to be
I mean,
sort of like emblematic of that generation.
I don't know. Adam, what do you say about that stuff, mate? What in terms of your parents, grandparents, etc.?
Well, I mean that's a bit of a difficult question for me, but no, I do see that a lot. That is kind of quite, and you do get a lot in that generation a lot, like especially when the Brexit stuff came around. They would often talk about like, well, my parents' generation didn't fight in a war for this, and I think, hang on a minute, where does this come from? But it disappears, the rest of the time, and even when it's there, it doesn't really mean anything. Yeah, they're kind of like a very much a, not to bring up generational theory, but they are very much a sort of lost generation. I suppose I don't know, maybe they just, because they grew up in the shadow of a fairly heroic generation. I don't know, that maybe they just maybe it all just feels a bit hollow to them.
Yeah, but you would think that after their parents have gone through that incredibly traumatic experience of like going through World War II, that they would be living in the residue of that, and there would be all of the cultural forces that existed and everything like that would have sort of permeated into them, but it hasn't at all. It's just like as if it never happened, and what did happen was of no consequence whatsoever. Absolutely, didn't fight for anything. I mean, I've even heard my mum say, "Well, the boot's on the other foot now. They're just doing what we did to them, like in terms of like migration." I was thinking, wow, I cannot believe my own mother is saying this. I just, words fail me.
Yeah, it's a weird one, and it's the thing is, when they all die off, it's not going to suddenly get any better though either.
Well, no, because
generations have just followed on.
I've got a cousin, right, who said to me, "God, fucking hell, how long have we got to keep putting up with this every 11th of November, like celebrating like the poppy day and shit like that?" And I thought, oh my god, it happened 100 years ago. Have we really got to remember this? And I was thinking to myself, oh my god, oh my god. I mean, what do you do with a population like this? And this is from my family, like a middle class family. I mean, you would think that they would. I would hold you to our highest standard.
So Joe, you'll forgive me for saying that, like, when I say that you're more based than you sometimes let on, I think your rant about your family kind of confirms that a little bit.
I've got very extreme views, but I'm just black-pilled. That's the difference.
Yeah, I know you are. I know you. Oh, listen, can I just say to Cardamon and Natman Prime in the chat, I was born in 1965, mate, and I'm a bit weird. All right, I mean, I'm a bit weird anyway, but my father was born in 1933. Okay, so he was 12 when World War II ended. And he joined the British Army in 1951. Okay, and his father was a regular soldier in between World War I and World War II. His grandfathers were both soldiers in World War I. My grandfather served on the northwest frontier of India in the 1930s. And then in 1940, after the Germans had bombed his tenement home flat in London, he rejoined the British Army as a volunteer, and he went across on D+3 and came home as late as he possibly could because he really liked the army. And he had 7 kids. My father was the eldest son out of the seven kids. Like, he had 4 daughters and 3 boys. My dad was the eldest one. And I'm not a boomer. I'm actually Gen X, not a boomer. 60 is about the end of the boomer generation, really. You're talking about the boomer. They were called boomers because it was the baby boom after World War II. Well, 15 years after World War II is probably enough to say that. So I'm a bit strange because my dad, he remembered World War II, obviously, because he was 7 when it started and 12 when it finished. And he used to collect shrapnel from the streets of London, and he got evacuated to North Wales, where he had a great time, and he got evacuated to Bracknell, where he didn't have a great time, and all that shit,
Interesting fact about Bracknell. My dad told me this. He said Bracknell had a whites-only policy, apparently, up until a certain period of time in the 80s. Apparently that's a true story.
Well, I don't know. My dad's memory of Bracknell was that when he was evacuated to Bracknell, he got rickets because the woman who took him in, because people volunteered to take in kids from central London.
Yeah.
And she only fed him what are they called? Those she didn't feed him very well, basically. So he got rickets. Right. And his mum came and visited him and said, "No, can't happen." And then they sent him to North Wales, where he had to go to chapel every Sunday, which he hated because it was in Welsh, because it was in North Wales, which is very, very Welsh. But on the other hand, he got rabbit stew every day. And this old farm labourer guy used to take him around and explain to him about the animals and all the rest of it. And my old man loved it in North Wales. He thought because the people were nice to him.
That's interesting because I can share a story about my my nan. She actually got sent to New York, to Rochester, because her father worked for I suppose you could call it a multinational company at the time. So she got sent to Rochester in New York for the duration of the war. She fucking hated it. She got put with some absolute bitch, some spinster. So, and she would have been, a girl in her teens, split from her sister, split up as a family, so gone through, and she had polio as well. So, what the things that, people went through, and it basically means nothing to their children. Like these stories that their own parents have, it's doesn't really mean anything to that sort of post-war generation. I just find it very, very strange.
Yeah, this is what I'm trying to say to you, Sojo. Is that my own family is a bit weird because my old dad was in World War II as a kid,
Yeah.
He used to turn around and say, he used to get into trouble because he would always, when the air raid sirens went off, he'd get into trouble because he'd do his shoelaces up, and he'd also go and find a dog before he'd go to the Anderson shower. And on the occasions when my grandfather was at home before he rejoined the army, he used to stand in the doorway of the Anderson shower in London, and this was central London, and he would stand there smoking a cigarette, watching all the searchlights and the anti-aircraft going off and all this bullshit, because he was a bloke, and that's what blokes did in those days, So it's I don't know, man. And so my dad had a slightly different feeling about all this stuff. And as I said, in 1951, he was guarding the Suez Canal zone with the British Army. And most of his mates were military guys as well. So, and I would say the military up until very recently was a generation and a half behind in terms of the corruption. But when I joined the British Army in the early 1980s, I'd say they were typical British guys of the late 1950s, really. If you understand what I'm trying to say, their attitudes were more even in the mid 1980s, the British Army's attitudes were more kind of the colonial British attitudes of the 1950s, which in my opinion were vastly better than the modern ones.
Yeah, but
You know?
you're obviously going to get more base people in the army anyway, because it's going to skew towards those kinds of people.
Not so much these days, but back in the day, yeah, sure.
Yeah, even now it's gonna the kind of person motivated to join the military is going to skew to be being more patriotic than the average person, surely. Otherwise, why would you join? You're certainly not joining for the pay and the conditions. I mean, come on.
Have you seen the most recent American Army TV advert?
Well,
have you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen them. The transgender stuff and the CIA adverts. I've seen them.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm skeptical. Again, I think that there's an element of clickbait to this, because that is not. I mean, it would be fun. I mean, it would be remarkable if there was like an influx of trans people into the military, but ultimately,
well, there has been,
minuscule amounts of people, though, and we all know that basically the American army depends on white Southerners, basically, and
absolutely true,
and people from Nicaragua and Puerto Rico and all these other places.
Yep, that's true.
So I view these adverts as being sort of tokenistic, because they know that the base demographic who are going to supply the boots on the ground are good old patriotic white boys from Maryland and stuff like that.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way, Sojo, because what really happens is, like, you only need one woman in a platoon, yeah, just one, and she doesn't even have to be an officer. It's worse if she's an officer, of course, in all respects, because women make terrible officers. But she can just be a private, and she can be a know-nothing dimwit private from wherever you want to name, and it makes no difference. As soon as she walks into a room, all the conversation has to change.
Yeah, but that's unrelated to recruitment, though. But I agree with you. Yeah, well,
yeah, it's going to change the whole, but it changes the whole culture. You see what I mean? It just changes the whole culture. I mean, like, a good, nice, traditional woman walking into a group of half a dozen blokes having a conversation is going to change what they're talking about, yeah?
But again, I don't understand why a normal, well-adjusted woman would join the army in an infantry role like that anyway.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, I totally agree with you about that. But what I'm saying is, anywhere where women go, see, this is why there used to be lots of male spaces. Even when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, there were quite a lot of male-only spaces, yeah? For one reason or another. It might be a gentleman's club, it might be whatever, yeah? Long room at Lord's, doesn't matter. And what they did was they destroyed every single one of those. Like, to the extent now that if you try to make a male-only space, I suspect it would be largely illegal. Yeah? And that was done for a reason. Because, like, men behave differently around women. Hang on a second, excuse me, guys.
I largely agree with that.
Sorry, guys, I was dealing with my little dog, who's actually appeared on this stream before now. But anyway, I absolutely am, and it changes culture, and it was done deliberately to change culture. And now, what I find is interesting is that you've now got TERFs, these feminists who don't believe that trans women are women, and I absolutely don't believe that trans women are women, but I also don't believe that TERFs are really our friends. They're now turning around and saying, but we've got to have female-only spaces. Well, I'd say, yeah, fine. I do believe there should be female-only spaces, but only if you can also have male-only spaces too. And all these people in between can go and make their own. If you don't know, you go somewhere else.
I wouldn't oppose the TERFs on that. I would support them. Yeah, by all means, have your own female spaces. Because as soon as you try and open up the door for that, I mean, you inevitably have to open up the door for men as well, because everything has to be equal.
Yeah, but you have to say that because you don't inevitably, because most of these TERFs, and you're talking about people like Germaine Greer, by the way, who don't like blokes. Trust me. Like that's a lot of TERFs don't like trans women because they regard them as men, which of course they are. They're men pretending to be
They are,
women.
yeah.
Yeah, they absolutely are. But they don't like men. So if you're going to do that,
I don't care.
Okay,
I don't care.
All right. So
the equalities legislation opens up the door for having male-only spaces if they start demanding female spaces. So it's simple. You support them. Strategic.
Yeah, but you also, when you support them, you have to say, yeah, absolutely, should be female-only spaces, but I also want male-only spaces as well. And you have to say that. You have to say that. Yeah.
I agree with you, but also, I mean, if something like that did go ahead, they got their own female spaces, then you can challenge it in court. It's going to fail to pass the equalities legislation. You're going to have precedent, and Bob's your uncle. You've got male spaces again. So there's opportunity here. I would support them on principle. I support that anyway. Women should be able to have their own spaces, and so should men.
Like I said, I absolutely agree with you, except every time we support them, we need to make it plain that, yes, I support female-only spaces, but I also want male-only spaces as well. And we need to make that clear, because otherwise we're going to do the usual right gets cut and drifts left thing.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Well, there you go. You do it your way, I'll do it my way, and I bet my way will work better.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a strong position on it, to be honest, because
I fail to see how supporting TERFs, but turning around and saying, yeah, I do think you're right. Women should have their own spaces, but also men should have their own spaces too. And if the TERF then turns around and says, oh, no, I don't agree with that, well, then we'll see where their colours really lie, won't we? Then we'll see how real they are in terms of our allies. Because, I don't think
I don't care about that. I see them as a tool to get what we want. I don't give a shit about them and whether they are our allies. They are not our allies. We know that, but I want to know how can I use them for own politically expedient goals. That's the only thing I give a shit about.
That's fine, but what you can't do in that instance, and this is what I'm really talking about, is not specifically mention that what we really want is sex-only spaces for both sexes.
Fine, whatever.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Nothing else. It's not that complicated. I just think if we don't do that, what we'll end up doing, if the TERFs were to win, which they're not, but if they were, is we'll end up with the same situation as before. Oh yeah, women can have their own spaces, but blokes can't. Which to me is equally bad. I don't want transgender women in inverted commas, i.e. blokes pretending to be women, to be able to walk into little girls' toilets and changing rooms. I really don't support that at all. But I equally think that there should be male-only spaces as well that women just can't walk into, which most of those feminists will never agree with. This is how we get pushed. This is how the right drifts left. We don't look at everything. We only look at one issue. Oh, yeah, TERFs. Oh, Germaine Greer is currently supporting something we agree with. Germaine Greer is one of the most man-hating, vile left-wing bitches who's ever lived.
We're going to call it a night?
I don't know. You got anything to say, mate?
Nah. I'm all out. I'm all spent.
Fair enough. Sergio, you got anything to say, mate?
Nah, mate. Done and dusted.
All right. Well, I guess that was at least some sort of thing for people to talk about. I'm going to end us on a tune, as I always do. Although I am a bit depressed this evening because I don't think we're winning at all.
We're not. And we're not going to.
Well,
make peace with it.
all right. I'm sorry. That's just not right. We are going to win because if we don't win, we're all sunk. And more importantly, like our sons and daughters are sunk and their children are sunk.
Oh,
So
life goes on. Just, England won't in its current form, but life.
You haven't got any kids, have you, Sojo?
No, that is true, but
all right, thank you, Adam. You got any kids?
No.
Right. Well, I have. Okay.
Well, sorry, you don't have any kids. Your opinion's worthless.
That's not what I meant. But what I'm trying to say.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, fair enough. Look, but I have a child who is fairly close to getting married, from what he tells me. And he's going to have kids, and I worry about him and his wife, and I worry about his kids, and that's why we fight.
He'll be all right. I mean, his American kids will be living in some rural, space.
He won't be living in America. He will not be living in America. No.
I thought she was an American.
Yeah, she is, but he won't be living in America. He's a Royal Navy officer, and they will not be living in America. This I know for a fact, because he doesn't want to live there. So there we go.
Ah, okay.
And he's my son, so what he says will go. So, and no, he won't be living in America. So this is not
play us out, Duke. Play us out.
Well, there you go, guys. I mean, come on, have a bit more spine, gentlemen. Really, we're supposed to be the good guys. Fuck's sake. Okay, this that I'm now going to play us is the March of Her Majesty's Royal Navy.
Cheer up, my lads, 'tis the glory is here. To find something more to this wonder here. To honor we call you the best and slave. For who are so free as the sound of the wave. Out the road on the ship, jolly jars on the men. We go with the wind. Steady, boys, steady. We'll fight and we'll conquer again and again. We never see a foe, but we reach them to stay. They never see us, but they wish us away. If they run, try we follow and run them to shore. And if they will fight us, we cannot be more. Out the boat on the ship, jolly jars on the men. We always attend. Steady, boys, steady. We'll fight and we'll conquer again and again. We'll return some triumph as if now we see. Astounded in justice and laws when we free. Then cheer up, my lads, with one heart and sing. Our soldiers, our sailors, our statesmen, our king. On the road, on the ship, jolly stars on our men. We go with the wind. Steady, boys, steady. We'll fight up the corner again and again.
Okay, so there you go. Hearts of oak, boys. We'll fight and we'll conquer again and again, which I think is a good thing for all British people to think on. Thanks for joining us. Please do like and subscribe to the video. I need a few more people to join to make it more useful. So anyway, guys, good evening. We'll see you next week.
No.
Thanks, Duke. Bye.